I copy you loud and clear.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Russian Federation. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Transmission soundtrack, please.
Hello, could I test the microphone for the United States, please?
We can hear you, United States.
Thank you very much.
China soundtrack, please. Can you hear me?
Hello, this is Thomas Rispoli from the UN. Thank you. Bye.
Hi, hello, good afternoon. This is Halima Dishong from St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Hello, good afternoon. Checking sound from Niger.
Hello from Estonia.
Hello, this is Soundcheck from Switzerland, TPR here. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Dinesh Sethia from India.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Matthias Lichertz from Germany.
Good afternoon. Here is Colonel Abram from Romania.
Good afternoon, Ron Brunsting from the Netherlands.
I can hear you, Netherlands.
Good afternoon, and welcome everyone to this Arria Formula meeting on suppressing the deployment of improvised explosive devices against peace operations. Thank you very much for taking the time on a Friday afternoon to join us for this very important subject. A few administrative issues to allow us to have a smooth session. Please have your mics off at all times. Only unmute when I give you the floor to speak. Also, there's a chat box where you can type, you can ask a question or make a comment. Sometimes some of you will have some briefings and you'll see something particularly pertinent in your briefing notes that everyone should know. Feel free to just put it in the chat box and it'll be seen. Also, I would request that you have your video on when you're making your intervention. And to understand that this meeting is being broadcasted live on UN web television. I want to acknowledge with gratitude our co-hosts, China, Estonia, France, Ireland, Mexico, Niger, Norway, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Tunisia, the United Kingdom, the United States, and Vietnam for their valuable contributions in preparing for this event. I also want to recognize again with gratitude our co-sponsors who are Belgium, Ecuador, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, and Portugal for your collaboration towards a meaningful and productive exchange on this subject. And thank you all for your participation. Distinguished colleagues, we are here because we have a common concern on the safety and security of peacekeepers. Peace operations have become dynamic, more dynamic, and are increasingly being conducted in complex environments that expose the peacekeepers to evolving safety and security threats. This requires a whole of United Nations system approach to ensure that peacekeepers are adept in their mission mandates and fit for purpose to predict, adapt, and respond to mission critical developments. Of course, it also means that for those of us who craft those mandates, we have to craft them having in mind the safety and success of peacekeepers. So it is a two-way street, but unfortunately, they usually get to suffer the direct consequences of being out in the field as we make policy for them here in New York and elsewhere. Today's debate focuses primarily on the growing threats associated with deployment of IEDs against peacekeepers. Peacekeepers have, while executing the mandates I was just speaking about, increasingly fallen victim to IED attacks deployed by armed groups and terrorist groups such as Daesh, Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab, and Boko Haram, among others. Terrorist groups have continued to learn and adapt, constantly evolving with new and sophisticated ways to operate undetected and forestall counter-IED measures. Not only have they improved their production and deployment capabilities, but also employed innovative approaches, including online and social media platforms, to train and issue instructions on the deployment of IEDs. We want today to reflect on this increasingly indiscriminate deployment of IEDs against peacekeepers and civilians, but more importantly, explore practical measures of suppressing such attacks. I am honored and privileged to be able to introduce a distinguished panel of briefers who will share their insights, knowledge, and firsthand experiences in addressing this challenge. We're particularly grateful that Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix, Under Secretary General for Peace Operations, has found the time to join us today. And I'm going to invite him to share his in-depth knowledge and insight on the matter. Then I shall go introducing our expert panelists one by one, and then we shall have your interventions as they come. Of course, I'm hoping that this session is as interactive as possible. And I know many of you may have prepared texts, but please try and interact as much as you can with the briefers and also with each other. And at the end of this, the aim really is to shed light and perhaps take away 2 or 3 key points that we can take into our regular work of shaping mandates in a way that is more sensitive and more protective of our peacekeepers. The USG for Peace Operations is going to have to leave us a bit early, so I will say hello, welcome, and goodbye to him because he shall leave the rest of us to continue the meeting. And I'll also give you another aspiration, and this is just an aspiration, that we shall be done in 2.5 hours, which means I'll try and run a tight ship, well, as tight a ship as you can run with member states using their sovereign right to speak as they will. But as friends, I hope you will keep your remarks as short as they possibly can be and as pointed and practical and strategic as possible. So thank you very much. And I invite USG Lacroix as well as Lieutenant General Dennis Gillenspoor, who's the Force Commander MINUSMA. Invite Brigadier Charles Mwanzige, who is a Kenyan at the IPSTC in Nairobi. Ms. Eileen Cohn, who's a Deputy Director Officer in charge of UNMAS, and she's there accompanied by a few other experts who will be able to engage with your questions in a more in-depth way. So if you want to go technical, they're ready for you. Thank you all for being here. And I will now open the floor to our briefers. First is to invite USG Lacroix to take the floor. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and greeting to my colleagues, fellow panelists, and to my UNMAS colleagues, the Acting Director, Eileen Cohn, and her team. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I thank the permanent mission of Kenya and all the co-hosts for arranging this important and timely meeting on a subject that is really of high concern to us every single day, I have to say. Improvised explosive devices, or IED as we call them, pose a very serious threat to international peace and security. Not only do they hinder freedom of movement, development, and socio-economic activities, they also seriously harm United Nations staff and peacekeepers. I therefore welcome the opportunity to take stock of our work in countering the IED threat, as well as to examine what more we can do collectively. First, I would like to provide a brief overview of the IED threat environments our missions are operating in and how it affects our work. Several political missions and peacekeeping missions operate in such environment, including UNSOM, UNSMIL, UNOWAS, MINUSMA, and MONUSCO. The overall trend of IED threats, casualties, and damages have been on the rise. In Somalia, 2020 data collected by our colleagues in the UN Mine Action Service, UNMAS, whose current OIC director Eileen Cohn will brief shortly, shows a drop in overall IED casualty, reversing a historic trend of year-on-year increases. Total casualty numbers were down from 1,865 in 2019 to 1,255 in 2020, mainly due to military operations and mitigation efforts by the UN. Nonetheless, total number of IED incidents in Somalia remained, as you can see, very high. On average, 39 IED incidents were recorded every month in 2020. The Democratic Republic of the Congo has seen an increase in incidents involving improvised explosive devices, in particular in the region of Beni. The escalation of conflict in Libya in 2020 has seen the systematic use of devices in and around civilian residences in Tripoli, resulting in a growing number of casualties. The United Nations for West Africa and the Sahel, UNOWAS, has observed the trend of IED use spreading from Mauritania through Mali and into Burkina Faso and Niger. In Mali, as surely my dear colleague, MINUSMA Force Commander Yulen Sporer will explain, IEDs have been a main cause of fatalities among the local population, local and international security forces, as well as among UN peacekeepers. The sustained increase in IED attacks threatens the conduct of MINUSMA operations and hampers mandate implementation by restricting peacekeepers' freedom of movement and access to communities. Non-state armed groups continue to rely on the use of established supply routes to maintain a constant flow of the resources required to support an effective improvised explosive device campaign. Although our field missions operating in IED threat environments have adopted mitigation measures, the flow of mines and IED components into the countries where our missions operate cannot be easily interrupted. Expanded and deepened collaborations in sharing information and joint investigation among states and with the private sector are key to disrupting the supply flows fueling the growing use of IEDs by armed actors. Second, I will update you on the actions we have taken to counter IED threats to peacekeeping. As I recently stated when I briefed the Security Council on performance, improving the safety and security of peacekeepers is a priority objective for the Department of Peace Operations and, of course, the Secretary General. It will continue to feature prominently as we start a new phase of action for peacekeeping, which we call A4P+. The Secretary General and I will speak in greater detail on A4P+ during the event that we are co-hosting with the Netherlands this coming Monday, and we look forward to seeing you at this event. Of course, a virtual event, as we have to go through in this current period. The Secretariat, field missions, and TCC and PCCs have put in place considerable mitigation measures to reduce the impact of IEDs on our peacekeepers and on mandate implementation. Over the past 3 years, we have made notable progress reducing the fatalities of peacekeepers due to malicious acts. These efforts have focused on several fronts, including the deployment of specialized equipment and mine-protected vehicles, the deployment of dedicated combat convoy companies and explosive ordnance disposal units, improved medical trauma care, and improved and better targeted training, especially to counter IEDs. But a recent spike in fatalities highlights that we have more to do and must keep pace with evolving threats. We are updating the action plan to improve the security of UN peacekeepers in response to the recent loss of lives and putting in place specific measures in MINUSMA and MINUSCA. Some of the changes include enhancing ongoing efforts to strengthen tactical and operational peacekeeping intelligence as well as situational awareness, reviewing mission requirements for forward surgical capacity. We're in the process of deploying more helicopter units to MINUSMA and MINUSCA, which are essential for quick reaction. And we're also looking to upgrade IED detection equipment and call on TCCs and PCCs to deploy units that are fully trained and equipped to face the threat. Holding perpetrators of crimes against peacekeepers accountable must also be a key priority for all of us. Fortunately, some progress has been made since 2018. Our focus has been on fatalities as a result of malicious acts since 2013 in the Central African Republic, the DR Congo, and Mali, where 80% of such peacekeeping fatalities, total of 224, have occurred since 2013, and where IED attacks are escalating against peacekeepers. This focus has resulted in an increase in the number of alleged perpetrators identified and detained, an increase in the percentage of cases with confirmed national investigations, and a number of convictions. In December 2020, we issued standard operating procedures on the prevention, investigation, and prosecution of serious crimes against United Nations personnel in peacekeeping operations and special political missions. It outlines responsibility and procedures to support national authorities on the investigation, prosecution, and adjudication of cases. Increased political and technical support by the United Nations to host countries for the investigation and prosecution of such cases also continue. In order to support the Secretariat's efforts, action from member states in line with Security Council Resolution 2518 on safety and security of peacekeepers will also be essential. Timely first aid and casualty evacuation save lives. The Secretariat has made significant progress in strengthening casualty evacuation capabilities. A series of guidance development efforts and CASEVAC stress tests since 2018 enhanced casualty care, streamlined the evacuation process, and reduced delays. Since 2020, despite the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact, efforts have continued to further implement the key elements of the CASEVAC policy and to expand use of telemedicine, particularly for remote diagnostics and mental health support. To address the traumatic and potentially long-lasting effects on the uniformed personnel, the staff counseling units have intensified efforts to engage with troops after IED attacks and other critical incidents. Going forward, the Secretariat will continue dialogue and efforts to ensure an integrated approach of medical services, strengthen forward medical support capabilities, accelerate the implementation of the COE manual requirements about individual/body first aid kits, and reinforce in-mission training, particularly on body first aid and alert messaging. We will welcome any support to help implement new series of CASEVAC stress tests, develop a casualty tracking system, design an online self-paced training on CASEVAC policy, and accelerate the release of a field medical assistant course. Progress is also made in enhancing peacekeeping intelligence and situational awareness. In updating the action plan on security of UN peacekeepers, we will go beyond passive defensive measures to conduct prompt incident analysis and disseminate lessons learned quickly among contingents. We also plan to improve CIED analysis capability in missions and explore CIED, meaning counter IED analysis capability in missions, and explore engagement with member states to identify IED networks with a view to neutralizing the armed actors. As mentioned earlier, access by terrorists to precursor materials for improvised explosive devices can be facilitated by weak border control. Under the United Nations Global Counterterrorism Strategy, member states are obliged to improve border and customs controls to prevent and detect the illicit traffic of inter alia, conventional ammunition and explosives. Improvised explosive devices remain a significant concern to the international community and are a cross-cutting challenge that requires a multifaceted approach. This challenge also requires that solutions be sought to the factors motivating armed groups to manufacture and employ such devices. I recall the recommendations made in the Secretary General's report A/75/175 on countering the threat posed by IEDs and would like to stress the importance of the Security Council supporting the United Nations in addressing this cross-cutting issue from multiple angles, including through supporting the political resolution of conflict. Over the next few years, we request member states support to promote cooperation among customs, law enforcement and border agencies to identify and share good practices and strategies in combating the illicit diversion and trafficking of materials for IEDs, as well as to consider joint investigations and other enforcement activities related to illicit shipments of such materials. We encourage troop and police contributing countries to deploy contingents with the required skills and capabilities, including surveillance, night vision, counter-IED, counter-UAS equipment, and mine-protected vehicles. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, USG, for your informative comments. I want now to invite General Dennis Gillenspore, who's a force commander, the United Nations Multidimensional Integrated Stabilization Mission in Mali, MINUSMA. And General Gillenspore comes with such a distinguished career in Sweden and serving across multiple theaters and also multiple responsibilities on the European level, in NATO, and within Sweden itself. There could not be a finer person to speak to us today about this particular threat and some practical ways forward. General Gillenspore and the other speakers will continue to speak probably quite briefly because we will get a chance to interact with them later, and they'll have a chance to interact with your comments and your ideas so that we get a fully rounded view from them. So General Gillenspore, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Distinguished Chairman, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to address this distinguished high-level panel on a crucial issue for our peacekeeper safety, as well as the ability for peacekeeping operations to efficiently implement their mandates. Following Undersecretary General Mr. Lacroix's strategic overview, it's my intention to share some practical observations from the field, in particular in Mali. As you all know, MINUSMA operates in a dangerous and complex security environment characterized by attacks by terrorist armed groups using IEDs. Our personnel is regularly being targeted for such attacks. And while the IED attacks are not only a threat to the mission and its personnel, it is also a threat to the local populations and other key actors. The threat impedes MINUSMA's freedom of movement, as well as protection and stabilization efforts. With respect to the Action for Peacekeeping initiative, we need to ensure that all the stakeholders involved address this complex and diverse threat to protect our personnel, but also to effectively implement our mandate, especially in relation to the POC mandate and the security sector reform. The vast majority of peacekeeping fatalities in MINUSMA occur as a result of IEDs. The trend we have seen in Mali is a significant increase of IED incidents starting 7 years ago as the mission was set up, where 34 IED events were registered, and in 2019, there were 194 IED events, a slight drop last year to 169. Since January of this year, MINUSMA has suffered a total of 50 casualties due to 5 IED attacks. One single event had a large impact on the statistical outcome. The recent suicide vehicle-borne IED attack on a temporary operating base in the central part of the country resulted in 27 wounded peacekeepers and 1 killed in action. However, the mission is making progress. The trend when it comes to the number of killed and wounded in action has been decreasing the past years, especially comparing 2019 to 2020, where we went from 22 fatalities to 6 in last year. Notably, almost half of all the IEDs are encountered and detected and neutralized before they can explode. This is also a performance ratio that has gradually improved throughout the history of this mission. We assess that the mission's increased operational activities and enhanced flexibility and agile posture have contributed to disrupting the IED threats. This slow yet positive progress proves that the mission adaptation and the measures that we have undertaken to have that they will have an effect, and most importantly, saving lives. Nonetheless, our goal is 0 wounded and 0 killed in action, and there is a way to go towards that objective. Excellencies, let me share some perspectives on the actions taken in MINUSMA in this very pertinent area. MINUSMA, through the UN Mine Action Service, provides threat mitigation support through technical advice and delivery of in-mission and pre-deployment training to troops. Moreover, UNMES has been strengthening its support to address these gaps through a counter-IED support package. And I'm sure that Ms. Kohn from UNMES will shed more light on this very important topic. Some TCCs, such as Benin and Niger, have demonstrated capacity to provide pre-deployment training on IED threat mitigation awareness courses autonomously through training of trainers and mentoring. The training provided by MINUSMA has also demonstrated that training of trainers is an effort to create self-sufficiency and sustainability of TCCs is bearing fruit. Still, in the face of the threat, we have to do more. We have now launched a series of tailored operations to support all our logistical convoys that are taken forward by our combat convoy companies, aiming at the 3 separate goals. The first one is to maximize the unpredictability of convoy movements and thus disrupt complex attacks and the opportunity to attack our peacekeepers. The second part is to make full use of all the intelligence assets, including unmanned aircraft systems, to provide the best possible intelligence picture for the troops conducting these convoys. And finally, during the execution, to dominate the terrain, to hamper and to detect the presence of IEDs where they are likely to be in place. Also, we enhance the medical support in certain critical regions. In February this year, we have set up a counter-IED task force, a working group that represents individuals from the mission, including UNMES, but also from the Malian armed forces, as well as the French-led Operation Barkhane. The task force aims at, within the framework of the respective mandates, exchanging information and best practices from the tactical level and up. The task force convenes both in Bamako and at the regional level. The objective of this task force are to, first of all, exchange counter ID products and information between partners, and secondly, to determine common issues and develop a partnership to increase cooperation and contribute to the common efforts by reinforcing the three counter ID pillars: prepare the force, defeat the device, and disrupt the network. During the last meeting, the task force facilitated exploitation of ID events through an improved cooperation between MINUSMA and Barkhane with regards to counter ID exploitation laboratories and developing standard operating procedures allowing the exploitation of ID evidence collected by the Malian armed forces to make use of MINUSMA's facilities throughout the region. The next steps include the development of a common IED strategy, while of course taking into account the different legal frameworks of the actors. The extension to other partners such as the European Union training mission and Force Conjoint G5 Sahel, and the development of tools such as common maps and databases are being considered. Excellencies, allow me to highlight 8 measures that need to be taken forward in order to enhance our capability on the field. First of all, we need to employ explosive ordnance disposal teams in every operation. Secondly, we have to make sure that the units have appropriate route clearing capabilities and technology ahead of convoy movements. Thirdly, all contingents should be equipped with electronic countermeasures capabilities. And fourthly, every infantry battalion, combat convoy company, and mobile task force units should have at least 2 unarmed aerial vehicles, so-called drones, to be able to detect movements of hostile elements ahead of convoys and patrols. The 5th point is to strengthen the security of temporary operating bases by ensuring compliance of prevailing standards and defensive measures when deploying into the field. The 6th point is to encourage all the TCCs to provide weapons intelligence teams to increase the intelligence collection and exploitation capacities of MINUSMA. And the 7th point relates to the disruption of ID networks and tracing supply chains. Over the long term, a successful counter ID strategy requires disrupting the supply chain networks of ID components, as been elaborated by the Undersecretary General. Within MINUSMA, we neither have the capabilities nor the mandate to trace the origin and the smuggling routes of these items. Moreover, one sustainable condition for a successful counter ID strategy is the effective restoration of state authorities throughout the country. And the last point relates to TCCs. They must ensure that the deployed peacekeepers have the adequate training to operate in asymmetric threat environments. Tailored training, mentoring are imperative and have proven effective at reducing casualties. Adequate pre-deployment training enables the peacekeepers to reach full operational capability swiftly, hence requiring less in-mission training once deployed in Mali. This allows the mission to increase its efficiency. I cannot stress enough the importance for the TCCs and their national armed forces to pay attention to the pre-deployment of their troops against the backdrop of the standardized unit requirements and the MOUs that clarifies the requirements put forward on the specific units. This is about the peacekeeper safety and lives. A very simple and effective mean at the national level is to use the experience gained in theater by engaging the units that have recently been deployed and make use of them during the pre-deployment training for coming and future rotations. Finally, let me conclude by stating that the current security environment in Mali poses a serious threat to all stakeholders, the local population, the Mali Defense and Security Forces, the international forces, including MINUSMA. IEDs will highly likely remain the main threats to MINUSMA and potentially other peacekeeping missions as well. Therefore, peacekeeping must continuously adapt to the evolving threat. While MINUSMA has improved its counter-IED capability, there are still gaps that need to be addressed. The goal should be to achieve a certain uniformity among member states on the training and technology required to address the IED threats. Also, we need to ensure that deployment of certain counter-IED technology becomes the rule in UN peacekeeping missions. Risk can be reduced by enhancing troop and police contributor capabilities and putting mitigation measures in place. The integration of technology into operations is one part of the solution. For that, policies and systems must be revised and strengthened. MINUSMA has undertaken several measures to mitigate the threat of IEDs, but we can and must do more to save our peacekeepers' lives, implement our priority tasks more efficiently, and be trusted by the local population as well as our personnel. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, General. I really appreciate those very clear comments from those 8 points. And towards the end there, you made the point about the training. The TCCs need to deliver peacekeepers who have the capabilities that are required to basically get the job done. And that's why I'm very pleased to invite the next speaker, who specifically focuses on preparing the peacekeepers for the theater. And that is Brigadier Charles Mwanzige, who is the director of the International Peace Support Training Center in Nairobi, Kenya. This is the oldest peace support training center in Eastern Africa and one of the largest on the continent. And it's a platform for training of peacekeepers regionally, speaking precisely to the kind of capabilities General Gillenspoor was asking that the peacekeepers be able to have. Brigadier Mwanzige, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. Your Excellencies, welcome to International Peace Support Training Center in Kenya presentation. And my name is Brigadier Mwanzige Lenjo. Kenya has the 4th highest number of improvised explosive devices incidences in the African continent. And of course, the first one is Somalia, followed by Mali, and the third is Burkina Faso. Somalia, our neighbor, has more IED incidences than all the other African countries put together. And that's approximately 55% of all Africa IED incidences. Note that Somalia has had about 2,053 IED incidences between 2017 and 2021, thanks to the data from UNMAS, while Kenya has had 139 during the same period. And the latest IED incident in Kenya occurred on Wednesday, the day before yesterday, at around 0730 hours, where a public service vehicle bus encountered an IED emplacement along the road in the northeastern part of the country, where civilian lives were lost. And it's because of these incidences that the United Kingdom and Kenya entered into a security compact in 2015 to create a counter IED capability for Kenya and the region. This capability is centered at the counter IED wing at the Humanitarian Peace Support School, that is HPSS, which is part of the International Peace Support Training Center. HPSS has the most advanced training facilities in both the East African region and indeed the African continent. This is saving civilian and military lives in peace support operations in Somalia and elsewhere. The training in Kenya at the moment is Kenyan-led, regionally focused in an internationally recognized center delivering high quality counter IED training that conforms to the United Nations curriculum. Our training focuses on the three main counter IED pillars. That is the first, prepare the force, defeat the device, and attack the network. In preparing the force, the institution focuses in training explosive hazard threat awareness, that is EHAT, IED search techniques, and counter IED mobile training teams. The second pillar, which is defeat the device, the scope covers training for high threat improvised explosive device disposal operators. And the third one, which is attack the network, the institution focuses on training both the military, police on their ability to successfully conduct basic level 1 post-blast site investigations on IED explosion sites, and sensitive site exploitation. At HPSS, the training has thus far achieved the following. The first one is over 2,000 personnel from 22 countries have received training through the center since 2016. And that ranges from basic awareness to specialist IED disposal, and many on a training of the trainer, that is TOT model, that spreads skills further. The institution has trained Ugandans, Ethiopians, Burundians, Rwandans, Malawians, Zambians, and most recently, that is between January and March 21st, this month, Ghanaians. And as we speak, I am proud to inform you that we have 2 Ugandan instructors teaching at HPSS alongside their Kenyan counterparts in a class comprising 50% Ugandans and 50% Kenya Defense Forces. The second one is HPSS instructors have also trained the border police unit, aviation security personnel, and anti-terrorist police in Nairobi and elsewhere, including on IED forensics and investigations to find and prosecute bomb makers. The third one is IEDs found and destroyed by AMISOM personnel in Somalia has increased by 5% from 2018 to 2019. Fourth, IED-related casualties to AMISOM personnel has also dropped by 11% over the same period. There is also evidence of the ongoing positive operational impact that the development of this capability has had on dealing with IEDs. Now, to consolidate the gains and enhance our capability further, the German government through GIZ is sponsoring the construction of a counter IED school of excellence at HPSS, and the construction is set to commence at the beginning of April 2021, that is next month. This school of excellence will be able to accommodate up to 200 personnel at a time. But on a negative note, the UK funding for the counter IED wing will end at the start of April 2021. That is in 4 days' time. Although our program is very mature, the current funding was used to fund travel and subsistence costs, particularly for countries providing troops to AMISOM operations in Somalia, such as Uganda and Ethiopia. This amounts to approximately $700,000 per annum, and without the money, IPSTC will no longer have students from outside Kenya. As a conclusion, there is a requirement to consolidate counter IED knowledge and training in one location for obvious synergies. Regional and international organizations can and should coordinate counter-IED effort, which can avoid replicating capability, e.g. requirements for only one East African counter-IED center of excellence. And that is where HPSS comes in. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much for that illuminating briefing. I'm sure you will have lots of questions and comments coming up. Next, I would like to invite Ms. Eileen Cohn, who's the Deputy Director and Officer in charge of UNMAS in the Department of Peace Operations. She comes with a long and distinguished career in this work, having served at least 25 years with the United Nations. And as I've said, she's backed by her team that she's picked to be able to respond to you. Ms. Cohn, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, distinguished Chairman. Excellencies, Undersecretary General, now perhaps Assistant Secretary General substituting, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for inviting me to discuss the very terrible threat that increased use of improvised explosive devices is posing to peacekeepers, UN personnel, national security services, and of course, civilians. You've already been briefed quite extensively on the threat, so I'm going to move to give you a sense of how the UN Mine Action Service enables peacekeeper mobility and safety, primarily through pre-deployment and in-mission threat-specific training and mentoring to troop and police contributing countries. And happily, you've already heard a bit about that also from General Gillenspore and from USG Lacroix. DPO has developed explosive ordnance disposal specialized training materials. The materials are available on the UN Peacekeeping Resource Hub and include a suite of lessons that teach troops how to recognize signs of IED use and take preventive measures, and also explain to EOD and IED disposal units how to render safe and dispose of explosive devices. UNMAS has an IED threat mitigation mobile training team that's just starting up. It's based in the Regional Service Center in Entebbe. And this team will be delivering this training package to TCCs in a train the trainer format. The MINUSMA Force Commander General Gillenspore already described a number of the efforts that we collaborate on to strengthen IED threat mitigation in Mali. And we do believe that our coordinated and holistic approach is yielding results. He mentioned that MINUSMA has seen an increase in its ability to detect and neutralize IEDs, and he mentioned that almost half of IEDs are now detected and neutralized before they can explode. In Somalia, and since 2017, UNMAS has trained over 50,000 African Union troops, including members of the Kenyan Defense Forces that have deployed to AMISOM. In addition to pre-deployment training, we're embedding technical advisors and mentoring units in all mission sectors across Somalia. The AMISOM casualty rate per incident has decreased since 2017, but as you've heard, the threat remains extremely high. Now, IED response is primarily a national responsibility, and consequently, we're providing EOD training to national security forces in several peacekeeping and non-peacekeeping settings, including all of those that were previously mentioned as extremely high incident countries by the previous speaker. To prevent armed group access to explosive precursor materials in the Central African Republic, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and in Mali, we are constructing weapons storage facilities and providing weapons and ammunition management training for national security forces. However, and unfortunately, there is no silver bullet or magic recipe. Despite all of these efforts, the challenges to prevention, mitigation, and response remain daunting. Pre-deployment and in-mission training is essential, as you've heard, and reduces the threat to peacekeepers, but prevention will depend on efforts to degrade the IED network and trace the supply chain. Prevention and response, as you've heard, will also require troop contributing countries and affected countries to invest in sustaining their ability to train their forces and retain the necessary expertise in their security services. Technology is part of the response, but upgrading equipment will not be enough. Advanced detection and mitigation measures, including electronic countermeasures, require a strong commitment to a full life cycle management, and of course there are associated costs. Equipment must be complemented with continued threat mitigation training as part of a context-specific and comprehensive response. Furthermore, in complicating matters, because the construction and use of IEDs is constantly evolving, training, equipment, and other mitigation measures must also constantly adapt. Widespread access to internet allows for the swift dissemination of information on IED construction. UNMAS has observed initiation methods in Afghanistan, for example, that were previously seen in devices in Mali. We've observed sophistication of some devices in Libya, confirming that knowledge has been transferred to Libya from other conflict areas. In 2020 and in early 2021, we saw some signs of an emerging threat to peacekeepers and humanitarians in the Central African Republic. And while there were no casualties, we did observe that the devices clearly mimicked the tactics, techniques, and procedures prevalent in neighboring countries. Now, over 15 UN entities have mandates related to IED threat prevention, mitigation, and/or response. And these include mandates that address tracing and control of the flow of precursors, degrading the IED network, gathering evidence for judicial processes, developing regional security frameworks. And we all work together in the framework of an interagency IED task force intended to strengthen a whole of system approach to IEDs. Of course, as individual entities and as a task force, we're eager to cooperate with member states, with regional organizations, in particular with the African Union, to counter the use of these insidious devices. And I'd like to close by appealing to member states to support troop contributing countries that are serving in high threat environments. For example, by providing bilateral equipment support, including costly but life-saving mine-protected vehicles and their maintenance, or by providing bilateral training through the Light Coordination Mechanism, or by providing trainers who can deliver EOD training through our mobile training team. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those valuable contributions. Before I open the floor, allow me to make our statement in my national capacity, and it will be very brief. And I want to begin by paying special tribute to the gallant men and women, both uniformed and civilian, who continue to put their lives on the line in the service of peace in spite of the threat of IEDs and other threats to their lives and well-being. Kenya is profoundly proud to be a country that has, since its independence, aspired to be part of UN peacekeeping, reflecting our conviction that our country and our armed forces and police must stand in line with our principles of a world where peacekeeping is possible as a route to sustained peace and cohesion globally. I want to reaffirm Kenya's unequivocal support as a troop contributing country for the Secretary General's action for peacekeeping declaration that seeks to inter alia strengthen our shared commitment on the safety and security of peacekeepers. We also support every effort aimed at securing the safety and security of peacekeepers, including the unanimously adopted Security Council Resolution 2518. In our capacity as a member of the Security Council for the next 21 months, we shall continue to press in all ways to ensure that the safety of peacekeepers is foremost when we are considering mandate renewals or adjustments. Allow me to suggest a few actionable points that can be considered in the efforts to diminish the threat of IEDs to UN peace operations. One is adequately resourcing specialized pre- and post-deployment training and provision of counter-IED equipment. Two is strengthening intelligence and information sharing in order to enhance proactive force deployment and preemption of imminent and potential IED threats. Peacekeepers should work closely with host communities to build trust in order to enhance early warning. Three is to monitoring and analysis of IED incident pattern to enable classification of different IED events for better prediction and preemption. Next is to include in mission mandates IED targeted provisions to monitor and assess IED threats and target individuals or entities buying, supplying, selling, or transferring IED components, including identifying illegal networks and supply chains. We need to also enhance national regulations of individuals and entities operating in their respective territories that are involved in the sale, supply, purchase, transfer, and storage of explosive precursors and components that could be used to make IEDs. We should also encourage and support countries, particularly those in conflict or emerging from conflict, in effective management of weapons, including ammunition and explosive stockpiles. We should encourage regional collaborative efforts to strengthen border controls with a view to preventing trafficking of materials and explosive precursors. Then we should build on existing infrastructure such as the Global Shield, Interpol, and UNODC to enhance national, regional, and international cooperation in the control of IED components and precursors. Let me reiterate, distinguished delegates and participants, in conclusion, that we must always remember to provide necessary victim assistance to casualties of IEDs, including medical evacuation and post-trauma support. We note in this regard, the victims of IEDs often require long-term medical and rehabilitation needs, including treatment for physical injuries and psychological harm. I will post some of those practical points in the chat room for all of you to be able to see. And I thank you for your attention. I now resume my capacity as chair of this meeting. And the next speaker on my list is the distinguished permanent representative of Vietnam. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. And I would like to thank all the briefers for their valuable contribution. Protection, safety, and security of peacekeepers is of crucial importance to the effective implementation of mission mandate and maintenance of international peace and security and realization of hope for the people on the ground. Despite effort by international community, deplorable attacks against peacekeepers have been on the rise and continue to be a pressing challenge, particularly with the recent deaths and injuries among peacekeepers in Mali and Central African Republic since the beginning of 2021. This toll shows a concerning trend toward the use of IEDs against peacekeepers, in addition to civilian casualty and destruction of vital infrastructure. We strongly condemn all attacks against peacekeepers and civilians, including through the use of IED. The IED by nature can be volatile and their developments unrecorded, which add more difficulties to detection and disposal even long after the conflict. I would like to stress the following point. First, all parties to armed conflict have to strictly abide by international humanitarian law and immediately stop targeting UN peacekeepers and civilians. Second, we call on the UN and the international community to take a comprehensive approach to counter the risks posed by IEDs, protect the safety and security of UN peacekeepers and personnel, and ensure a safe environment for sustainable peace and development for countries concerned. This should focus on multilateral cooperation efforts, and especially in terms of technical and funding assistance to affected countries in all aspects of my action relating to IEDs. The capability of mission should also be enhanced in accordance with the specific context. Third, national governments have the primary responsibility for managing all types of weapons, munitions, and explosives to prevent their diversion into the hands of terrorists and illegal armed groups. Vietnam has made great effort in this regard, and is one of the countries most affected by explosive remnant of war. We are ready to contribute more to UN peacekeeping with engineering units as well as a demining capability. To conclude, Mr. Chair, we reiterate the importance of the safety and security of our peacekeepers. As agents of peace, they must be protected against targeted hostility by any group, any means, and methods of warfare. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for keeping your remarks brief. I will ask delegations to keep their remarks to 3 minutes or less, as much as you can, and it'll be much, much appreciated. Next, I have the privilege of calling on the representative of the United States, permanent representative of the United States. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ambassador. And first, let me begin by saying that Ambassador Thomas Greenfield, who has participated in the first part of this and learned a great deal, unfortunately has had to depart for another event. She extends her regrets. I'm honored to offer these remarks on the ambassador's behalf. And let me begin by thanking the briefers for their remarks, and again, thanking you, Ambassador, and your delegation for organizing and hosting this event, which the United States was pleased to co-host in our national capacity. Let me begin by saying we very much appreciate Kenya's leadership as a regional promoter of peace and security. The Kenyan Defense Forces, along with other Kenyan security services, have responded to numerous terrorist incidents while also disrupting al-Shabaab and ISIS attack planning, recruitment, and travel. These Kenyan security forces have made East Africa and the broader continent a safer place for its citizens. The United States understands the threat IEDs pose for your civilian and security populations, and we appreciate your proactive leadership to ensure a more effective and coordinated response. Last month in Mali, a suicide vehicle with improvised explosive devices killed a Togolese peacekeeper and injured 27 others. That devastating attack followed another in January, where 1 Egyptian and 4 Ivorian peacekeepers were killed by IEDs and 5 Togolese were seriously injured. These are just the latest examples of the terror that our heroic peacekeepers face in the field, especially those who are serving in Mali, Somalia, the Central African Republic, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. In many cases, those involved in IED attacks against peacekeepers may meet the criteria to be designated for sanctions. It's clear the Security Council has a serious responsibility here, and the fact that nearly every member of this council is co-hosting this meeting shows that, in theory, we all agree. But we owe it to our slain and injured peacekeepers to turn these words into action. This council has highlighted several key areas and concrete actions to make peacekeepers safer in Resolution 2518. The Secretariat has also outlined specific steps that can be taken in its action plan to improve the security of UN peacekeepers. I want to highlight 3 of those action areas today: strengthening situational awareness in the field, enhancing training, and ensuring that missions are equipped to protect themselves against this threat. First, we must increase situational awareness to combat IEDs. Intelligence and surveillance assets can help address the IED threat by ensuring that missions know where IEDs are located and which are the actors responsible. But we need broader and better understanding and implementation of the UN's military peacekeeping intelligence doctrine across missions and across troop contributing countries. This would help support proactive, information-driven operations that are better protected against threats. Second, we need to better train peacekeepers to handle IED threats. Effective training must be consistent and it must be persistent, based on a common standard and include the mission-specific realities of the operational environment. To take action on this front, I'm very pleased to say that the Biden-Harris administration has prioritized peacekeeping training through the US's Global Peace Operations Initiative. Under this initiative, the United States has invested more than $1.6 million in the UN's development of standardized IED trainings. In July 2019, the United States officially presented the curricula to the UN Undersecretary General for Peace Operations. We also introduced the curricula during US Africa Command's third annual Counter IED Working Group at Kenya's Humanitarian Peace Support School. And we will continue to look for and find ways to partner with interested member states on IED training. With the standardized curricula now ready, the next step, we believe, is for troop contributing countries to integrate these trainings into their pre-deployment and then apply that training on the ground. Member states and UN agencies should work together to ensure all personnel searching for and disposing of IEDs have the appropriate skills to do the job. The aim should be to ensure the safe, effective, and efficient disposal of IEDs. Third, and finally, the United States supports these efforts through the provision of much needed equipment in the field. And we call on others to do the same. For example, we're providing counter IED and explosive ordnance disposal deployment equipment to a number of our partner countries, both in support of their battalions and their specialized units. We have also provided armored personnel carriers to a number of partners for missions and pre-deployment training. And we are augmenting training centers to improve soldier skills on vehicle capabilities, operations, and maintenance prior to their deployments. Our peacekeepers are the extension of the Security Council, and they require our full support. So let me end by saying we look forward to working with everyone here today to do whatever we can to combat the threat of IEDs and protect our peacekeepers. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you very much for that contribution. I have the privilege of calling on the permanent representative of France. Nicolas, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, first, I thank the panelists for their presentations. I would like to start by saluting the courage of the Blue Helmets, of humanitarian personnel and of humanitarian personnel who carry out their mission under the threat of improvised explosive devices, and to pay tribute to those who lost their lives. It is imperative to acknowledge the level of the threat posed by improvised explosive devices. They caused nearly 170,000 casualties in the world in the past 10 years, with roughly 80% of civilian victims, including children and humanitarian personnel. In peacekeeping missions, MINUSMA is today the most affected. Improvised explosive devices have structural consequences for all the peacekeeping chain, from the capability of the missions to deliver on their mandates to the will of member states to provide troops. It is likely that peace operations will be increasingly confronted with this threat, both in their civilian and military components. The United Nations has started to adapt accordingly. The UN Mine Action Service is developing the expertise, resources, and has the mandate to counter IEDs, to support peacekeeping operations, and to raise awareness of civil society. Peace operations have started acquiring new technologies, such as detection systems. Medical evacuations processes have improved, becoming faster thanks to revised decision-making process. Yet countering IEDs is a permanent challenge, and the first results must be consolidated. It requires continuous efforts to mobilize complex and rare know-how, the development of intelligence capabilities, the mobilization of high-tech equipment, and efficient medical evacuation procedures. Our responsibility today is to go further. We must provide the UN with the necessary means of action, with the best equipment and improved intelligence capacities. Of course, each troop contributing country must continue to train and equip its contingents before deployment. Partnerships are important to support these efforts. France is very much involved in terms of capacity building of African troop contributing countries. and also through the operational cooperation between the Barkhane Force and MINUSMA. In particular, France supports a network of 2 regional demining schools in Benin and Lebanon. I would like to conclude with questions to our speakers. To Mrs. Cohen, what are the priority needs of the UN to better counter IEDs? To USG Lacroix, what structural changes are necessary to ensure that all the contingents have the necessary means of actions? And to General Gillenspoor, what are the lessons learned at the mission level to maintain the mobility of the force and continue to conduct robust operations in spite of the IED threat? I thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for those questions, which I think are actually questions many of us have, and I shall look forward to their answers. Next, I have the privilege of calling on the permanent representative of Ireland. Geraldine, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed, dear Martin. And I want to say thank you also to our briefers today, to you and to the briefers, for bringing our attention to such a really important topic. For Ireland, keeping safe the women and the men we deploy as peacekeepers is really paramount. And that's why we're delighted to be with you now, Martin, co-hosting today's discussion. As we know from our own experience, one fatality is one fatality too many. This year, regrettably, 10 noble UN peacekeepers have been killed, many more injured, the majority caused by IEDs. We extend our deepest sympathies to the families of all who gave their lives in the cause of peace, and we condemn such attacks unequivocally, calling for perpetrators to be brought to justice. Ireland has developed significant expertise in the area of countering landmines, IEDs, and explosive remnants of war. We are committed to sharing this experience and working to build capacity among other troop contributing countries. We see working together to enhance troop contributor and host nation capacities as central to increasing the safety of all our peacekeepers. This has inspired us also to contribute to the UN IED survivability doctrine and to the related training capability development. Mr. Chairman, as we know, armed groups are becoming ever more innovative in their use of IEDs. We need to be equally innovative in how we mitigate this threat. This includes examining how armed groups exploit the accessibility of information and technology. And here, effective export controls are crucial. Knowing when, where, and how an adversary might attack our peacekeepers is the most effective mitigation measure of all, of course. This requires an enhanced understanding of the peacekeeping operational environment. We've heard almost every speaker say that so far. As a former co-chair of the Peacekeeping Military Intelligence Train the Trainer working group, Ireland knows the importance of building an intelligence picture of peacekeeping environments, both to mitigate this risk and more broadly, to enhance mandate implementation. We welcome the revised UN peacekeeping intelligence policy, which we believe provides a strong framework for enhancing situational awareness in UN peacekeeping operations. Operations should be intelligence-led, and Ireland calls for the full implementation of UN peacekeeping intelligence policies on the ground where they matter. The recently adopted C34 report sets out a number of recommendations relevant and important to this discussion today. These include strengthening IED threat mitigation at the mission level and increasing pre-deployment training, including through deployment of mobile training teams to enhance skills amongst troop contributing countries. We strongly support those recommendations. Martin, women peacekeepers play an increasingly important role in our UN peacekeeping responsibilities globally. We see it as critical that they are also upskilled in this regard, and we believe firmly that women peacekeepers should have the opportunity to serve right across the full range of roles in their deployments. Many IED attacks occur in populated areas, causing indiscriminate harm, horrific harm to civilians, including children, and damaging critical civilian infrastructure, also interrupting the delivery of important humanitarian aid. These impacts can have immediate and long-term consequences. Our approach, we believe, should be to recognize the multifaceted challenges that IEDs pose, including the gendered impacts of their use. Ireland is chairing the consultation process to agree a political declaration on explosive weapons in populated areas in order to address the humanitarian impact of explosive weapons and to deliver, importantly, behavioral change to strengthen compliance with international humanitarian law. We look forward to working on this with all stakeholders. Finally, Mr. Chairman, the use of IEDs poses a serious threat to the safety and security of our peacekeepers on a daily basis. It poses a threat to those they seek to protect. We must do more to mitigate the threat, including sharing our expertise and building greater capacity among TCCs. As a long-standing troop contributor, Ireland, with decades of experience in this field, assures you of our continued commitment to provide leadership in this. And thanks you again for having an excellent discussion on a Friday afternoon. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you very much, Geraldine. Allow me to now call on the representative of Mexico.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I would like to thank Kenya for convening this meeting. The beginning of 2021 has been marked by tragic attacks with IEDs that took the life of MINUSMA and MINUSCA peacekeeper. Mexico condemns these acts of violence in the strongest terms and pays tribute to the courage of all peacekeepers. The continued use of IEDs compel us to keep us raising awareness of this challenge. And that's why we're very proud to co-sponsor this Arria Formula meeting. Mr. Chairman, IEDs continue to be widely and increasingly used in several conflicts in the world, from Afghanistan to Somalia. Mexico condemns the use by whomever of improvised explosive devices in all circumstances. As USG Lacroix just mentioned, it is crucial to promote an integrated response from the UN system to address the cross-cutting challenges in terms of situational awareness. The upcoming UN Peacekeeping Ministerial Conference in the Republic of Korea could be a key opportunity to share good practices to enhance the safety and security of peacekeepers from the IED threat in terms of training, information, capacity, equipment, and technology. As peacekeeping forces are not combatants, they are entitled to the protections granted by international humanitarian law, and it should be underscored once more that attacks against them are prohibited. Any attack on peacekeeping operations, regardless of the instrument of war used, may constitute a war crime and therefore should be investigated and prosecuted accordingly. For decades, Mexico has promoted restrictions and prohibitions to all weapons of indiscriminate nature, including those activated by the victims or the ones that, due to their own characteristics, cannot fulfill international humanitarian law principles. This is the case of IEDs. In our view, the provisions of the CCW and of the Anti-Personnel Landmine Ban Treaty apply to IEDs. Thus, we call on the parties of these instruments to redouble their efforts to fulfill their obligations under these treaties, as well as relevant United Nations Security Council resolutions. We call on those states that are not parties to these treaties to consider signing and ratifying them. Furthermore, we reiterate the importance of Common Article 1 to the Geneva Conventions regarding the obligation to respect and ensure the respect of IHL. National controls of materials that could be used to make improvised devices, as called by relevant UN Security Council resolutions, must also be strengthened, bearing in mind that some of these regimes have already started to look more closely into this situation. Beyond military and security concerns, IEDs cause devastating humanitarian impacts on civilians and become a socioeconomic and developmental challenge for affected communities and hamper the achievement of sustainable development goals. Therefore, there is a clear need to enhance international cooperation for their clearance as well as for victim assistance. Last but not least, we commend the role of UNMAS, especially to the IED threat mitigation programs, which aid both civilians and peacekeepers. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for that. I now recognize the representative of Niger. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would like to present apology.
Sorry, Niger. I hear there's some participant that I'm hearing, I don't know from where, future peacekeeper. So please mute your microphones if you can. It's a delightful sound, but we want to hear the representative of Niger. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, apologies of Ambassador Abari, who is out of town. Mr. Chair, as the death toll rises in the Sahel from cowardly attacks on civilian population, with the latest having claimed the lives of 205 innocent civilians last week in Niger, we are at the same time witnessing a new trend of improvised explosive devices, lethal attacks on United Nations peacekeepers and the allied regional forces. Therefore, the meeting of today is more than timely. My appreciations also goes to our distinguished briefers and the co-sponsors of today's meeting. Mr. Chair, as we pay tribute to the UN peacekeepers who have maintained the conduct of their mission despite the difficult circumstances due to the COVID-19, it must be acknowledged that these missions operate in large countries with harsh terrain, lack of roads and other transportation infrastructure, and porous borders. Taking advantage of these circumstances, non-state armed actors have stepped up their attacks by means of improvised explosive devices. This new sustained use of these devices, as well as their attractiveness for terrorists, compels us to rethink our strategies and adjust to this ubiquitous threat. It is therefore imperative that we develop a strong, coherent, and holistic approach to tackle this issue, one that not only promotes the information sharing and collaboration, but also allows for coordination among all the actors involved to protect the lives of the peacekeepers and the population at large. To that effect, we welcome the many initiatives of the United Nations Mine Action Service, UNMAS, such as the Smart IED Threat Mitigation Technology Roadmap, which aims at getting the right information to the right people at the right time to help them share experiences and insights to improve the safety in the IED threat mitigation working environment. The nature of this threat and the fact that IEDs are mostly produced outside of any government supervision or knowledge requires us to develop effective information sharing tools that would allow us to build databases of design, components, and the place of origin of the material used to manufacture them, readily available to be shared across countries and relevant agencies. I would like to take a moment to commend and highlight the excellent support that UNMAS is providing in terms of IED avoidance training, safety and management of explosive threats, compliance with international mine action standards, and weapon and ammunition storage to the national defense and security forces, and to infantry contingents deployed in MINUSMA in our region. As recent incidents have shown, a more robust technical assistance is needed in order to empower all contingents to navigate the very dangerous areas of operations. Mitigating the threat of IEDs to peacekeepers must also extend to the humanitarian sectors and the civilian population, as the security of those keepers is inextricably connected to that of the population they serve. To that effect, it's important that humanitarian personnel as well as civilians be trained in ID recognition, reporting and awareness, and victim assistance in areas heavily contaminated by IEDs. Mr. Chair, as mentioned earlier, the strengthening of capacities to counter IED threat must pass through collaboration, whether it be at the regional or international level, and through the inclusion of international financial institutions. As most of the peacekeeping missions are on the continent of Africa, it is essential to support UN entities, affected states, and African Union with predictable, sustainable, and flexible funding, as the success against the deployment of IEDs against peace operation depends on the continued commitment of donors and TCCs. Equally important, Ms. Chair, is the development of synergy between agencies such as AMAS and the African Union. We welcome the close collaboration between those two institutions in implementing the African Union Mine Action and IED and explosive remnants of war strategic framework, with the aim to support AU member states in reducing the threat posed by conventional weapons, mines, explosive remnants of war, cluster munitions, and IEDs, in accordance with the relevant international instruments and best practice. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Samadou. I have privilege to invite a permanent representative of Norway, Ambassador Monajou. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Martin, and let me thank you and Kenya for organizing this Arria meeting on a sadly relevant topic. Like others, Norway has lost personnel in IED-related attacks, and we welcome this opportunity to engage in discussion on how we can deal with this scourge. IEDs are simple, cheap, and deadly. Improvised does not mean that they are not sophisticated. Indeed, the internet has been a great enabler. Hostile actors quickly adapt to new situations and technology. And the means, methods, and purpose of the use of IEDs varies in and across conflicts. This all means that protecting our peacekeepers from the threat of IEDs is a complex task, requiring a comprehensive approach. And Norway fully supports the development of a counter-improvised explosive device strategy by the UN Secretariat. We need to understand the threat situation. This includes being able to gather, analyze relevant information about hostile actors and their methods. And interaction with host countries and the local population is key. We must be prepared for the threat. Our peacekeepers need to be properly trained and equipped. And in this regard, Norway supports the deployment of specialized mobile training teams in partnership with the UN Mine Action Service. We must also strengthen our ability to detect and defeat the threat. It is important that we explore the use of new technology, such as unmanned aerial systems, to detect activities in the area of operations and along routes of transportation. Continued support for the Mine Ban Convention is also fundamental. The convention has established a norm against indiscriminate weapons, such as anti-personnel mines. And we must pursue all relevant avenues to ensure that those using IEDs in violation of international humanitarian law are held to account. There is no easy solution, but we owe it to our peacekeepers to minimize the risks they run in the pursuit of the safety of others. I thank you.
Thank you very much for those very useful comments. I would like to invite the DPR of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Kimani. St. Vincent and the Grenadines commends the Republic of Kenya for convening today's discussion, and we are pleased to join as co-hosts of this event. We also thank our esteemed briefers for their remarks on this important issue. Against the backdrop of a continually evolving global context in which cross-border challenges like terrorism, organized crime, health crises, and climate change threaten the social fabric of fragile states, peacekeeping engagements have become increasingly complicated. Peacekeepers are mandated to carry out difficult tasks in increasingly harsh environmental, political, and security conditions. The presence of improvised explosive devices add further complexity to these operational difficulties by impeding the performance of peacekeeping operations, confounding situational awareness, and threatening the lives of peacekeepers, humanitarian personnel, and civilian populations. Peacekeeping missions must therefore be equipped with the necessary expertise and resources to detect and counter these threats. These capacities must also be transferred to host countries to strengthen national ownership and responsibility for explosive ordnance. The indiscriminate use of IEDs against peacekeepers, humanitarian actors, and civilians must be thoroughly investigated and perpetrators held to account. When the guiding international humanitarian law principles of distinction, proportionality, and precautions are ignored, states should spare no effort in ending impunity for the resulting crimes. All states and the regional and sub-regional organization within which they are situated must work diligently together to improve transparency and accountability across supply lines, to manage the traceability of IED components, and to mitigate their illicit transfer across porous borders. At the field level, there is an urgent need for capacity building through both technical and financial assistance in all regions, particularly to conflict-affected countries in fragile regions across the Sahel, Central Africa, and the Horn of Africa. Core competencies in areas such as ammunition stockpile management, and explosive ordnance disposal should be incorporated into security sector reform programs, and modern technologies that enhance IED awareness and facilitate route clearance should be transferred to affected states. Our delegation also emphasizes the importance of information sharing among states, regional and international organizations, and the private sector to tackle the interconnected challenges of transnational organized crime and terrorism that have enabled the proliferation of IEDs. To conclude, St. Vincent and the Grenadines extends its gratitude to and reaffirms its support for all troop and police contributing countries and their uniformed personnel. We commend their ongoing commitments and sacrifices, and we welcome all efforts to enhance their safety and security. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Halima. Next, I would like to call on Tunisia. I don't know if that's Ambassador Ladek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm the
Ali.
of Tunisia.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, at the outset, I would like to express my appreciation to the Permanent Mission of Kenya for organizing this very timely meeting. I also thank the distinguished briefers for their very instructive and insightful presentation. Tunisia paid tribute to the men and women who have served and continue to serve in peacekeeping operations for their high level of professionalism, dedication, and courage. A particular tribute is due to those who have given their lives for the maintenance of peace and security. Mr. Chair, the United Nations peacekeeping missions are increasingly operating in hostile environments, featuring armed groups, terrorists, and organized crime, as well as IED, which exposes them to significantly high risk. The unanimous adoption by the Security Council of Resolution 2518 1 year ago is very indicative of the growing awareness about this major challenge. In fact, ensuring the safety and security of peacekeeping personnel has become vital. It has become also crucial for mandate execution and equally essential for sustaining the relevance of the United Nations in maintenance of international peace and security. While appreciating the effort undertaken by the Secretary General to mobilize all partners and stakeholders to promote stronger safety and security for peacekeepers, especially in the framework of action for peacekeeping initiative. We believe, in light of continuing threats targeting UN peacekeepers in the field, there is a strong need today to work closer with the Secretariat, troop and police contributing countries and host countries in order to ensure the UN peacekeeping mission are adequately resourced, trained, and informed, and that all deployed peacekeepers are equipped effectively to implement their mandate safely. If fatalities are rising in field mission, this means that we are not taking enough measures to operate securely and to adapt fully to increasingly risky operational environments. Mr. Chair, improvised explosive devices are among those threats causing a growing number of casualties among peacekeepers, especially operating in mobile convoys, convoy escort, and quick reaction force. Cheap and relatively easy to construct, IEDs have increasingly become the weapon of choice for non-state actors, terrorists, and armed groups. Personnel are killed and seriously injured by IEDs when they lack the equipment, training, and discipline needed to detect IEDs and avoid an explosion. Troops should not be deployed without the necessary and appropriate equipment and training. Troop and police personnel selected to be deployed in mission with IED risk should be fully equipped with appropriate mine-protected vehicles. The presence of military engineers to supervise anti-IED operation would be highly useful. Member states need also to ensure that pre-deployment training establishes IED mitigation skill and mindset of troops. Counter-IED training should continue during the deployment of IED mitigation tactics, should be systematically integrated as a core military skill. Furthermore, UN mission and battalion should enhance intelligence capabilities for IED detection, including human intelligence. In the same vein, we need to work on improving the system of medical support and casualty evacuation for injured peacekeepers, and to ensure that adequate medical facilities and qualified personnel are deployed to provide the essential response at all times within the mission areas. In conclusion, Mr. Chair, peacekeepers are deployed in deteriorating and complex political and security environment and face asymmetrical and complex threats and attacks. Host countries have also an important responsibility in ensuring their safety and security. Perpetrators of crimes against peacekeepers must be held accountable. Hosting countries' peacekeeping operation must investigate and prosecute the responsibles. We underline that all parties should cooperate and provide every possible assistance to the competent national authorities investigating or prosecuting any crimes committed against deployed United Nations peacekeepers. I thank you.
Thank you very much for that contribution. Let me just say that my initial timing and estimation of time is clearly not going according to plan. And so I'll ask everyone who's coming up to speak to just trim what you're saying to 2 minutes. Otherwise, I'm going to have to take your Friday afternoon, which obviously you don't want. So just trim it down to 2 minutes so that we're able to listen to as many people as possible and also come back to the briefers. So 2 minutes. Next, I have the representative of the United Kingdom. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, you do like to set a challenge, don't you? 2 minutes, you say, just as you give me the floor. I'll do my best. So look, thank you very much. Let's skip the thanks. We'll say well done to the briefers for being brilliant and go straight to the heart of it. Let me talk about a few things. One, I want to talk about training and the capacity building and support necessary. It's vital that peacekeepers, when deploying, have the right skills and training, that they have the right equipment, and that can make a strong defense against IEDs. Now, Brigadier Mwaziga noted that since January 2020, the UK has provided over $1.3 million worth of support to the Humanitarian Peace Support School in Nairobi, which has delivered courses to personnel from 12 UN police and troop contributing countries. And that IED awareness training has been an integral part of the pre-deployment training we've done. So we're very pleased about that. And that's a sort of model we hope to go forward on. We're also a huge donor, or a big donor to the largest national donor to the UN Mine Action Service. So as well as the training and defending, we've got to make sure we can counter the threat with accurate understanding of the threat environment. That means collecting information, analysis, and dissemination of that information. We often talk about this in terms of peacekeeping intelligence. Of course, by that, we don't mean anything scary being imposed on a country or creating some enormous spy agency. We're simply talking about understanding the situation that peacekeepers are in when they go outside the wire every day. So it's really important that we continue to work on that peacekeeping intelligence and ensuring that we give everybody who is working for the Blue Helmets and working for all of us the best possible understanding of what's in their environment. And then finally, I think we need to make sure that we can act in a joined up way to disrupt the networks, the people who are providing the materials and technical know-how to perpetrate IED attacks. In 2019, this council acted to restrict the transfer of IED components to Somalia because of the rise in attacks by Al-Shabaab. It's one example, Mr. Chair. We must use the tools available to us. Thank you very much. That was 2 minutes.
See, Jonathan, I knew you could do it. I knew you could do it. Always rising to the challenge. Thank you. If Jonathan can do it, I'm sure everyone else will try their best. You may not make it exactly 2 minutes, but 2 minutes and 15 seconds, perhaps. Next, I have the permanent representative of Estonia. Sven, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Martin. I would also like to thank Kenya for organizing the meeting and the briefers for their insights. And I believe it has clearly demonstrated our common strong concern at the serious harm that improvised explosive device attacks have caused the United Nations peacekeepers, staff, and humanitarian workers by threatening their lives, increasing the cost of their activities, limiting their freedom of movement, and hampering mandate delivery. Around the world, UN peacekeepers operate in a multitude of different conflicts, which have them face a variety of threats. As the nature of conflict evolves, so does the nature of warfare and the weapons that are used. Deliberately targeting the UN has become an approach for those not interested in peace, those who profit from instability, the spoilers. This, however, makes the job of peacekeepers so much more important because for millions of people around the world, our blue helmets represent the last best hope for peace and stability. To be able to protect civilians and also themselves, UN peacekeepers must constantly adapt to different conflicts and adapt to changing conditions. Focusing on developing a culture of performance and accountability will improve the ability to do so. We are hopeful that the recent rollout and implementation of tools such as CPAS will help missions speed up necessary adjustments. It is also important to focus on training and preparation. Troops that enter into a particular conflict must possess the prerequisite capabilities and equipment to face its particular challenges. I would be glad to hear more of how initiatives such as the light coordination mechanism and triangular partnerships have supported the developing of specialized capacities and capabilities. We also welcome initiatives to better integrate modern technology and peacekeeping intelligence capabilities into peace operations. By helping to improve the situational awareness of troops in real time, this contributes to the protection of civilians and security of personnel and the implementation of missions mandates. New technologies, including UAVs, are by no means a silver bullet to the threat of IEDs, but they can be a valuable additional tool in the arsenal of well-prepared and trained peacekeepers. I would finish with this question. Is there some common pattern or threshold of when and why armed groups or other peace spoilers turn to using IEDs against UN peacekeepers? Would you say it is related more to the spoilers developing the capacity for making IEDs? or getting access to required materials, or more due to the role of the UN in the conflict changing? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Sven. I would like to now welcome the representative of China, Ambassador Xuan. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. IEDs constitute one of the main causes of peacekeeping casualties. This year, nearly 30 peacekeepers of MINUSMA were seriously injured and one killed in IED attacks. It shows once again the grave threat of IEDs to blue helmets. We call for joint efforts of the Security Council, the Secretariat, the TCCs, PCCs, and host countries to collectively address this challenge. Peacekeeping missions should be provided with adequate equipment, including signal block devices and mine-protected equipment based on regular risk assessments. Host countries should take concrete measures to reduce the production and use of IEDs, including putting IED components under strict control, cracking down on IED manufacturing facilities, etc. We encourage host countries to share information on IEDs with peacekeeping missions, which is helpful for the missions to prevent IED attacks and reduce casualties. Security Council Resolution 2518 should be fully implemented. Security training, including mine clearance training, should be strengthened to enhance peacekeepers' overall capacity of self-protection. China attaches great importance to the safety and security of peacekeepers. We have trained peacekeepers from many countries on prevention and disposal of IEDs. In 2017, China co-chaired the drafting of the IED disposal standards of the UN. China is ready to work with the international community to improve the safety and security of the peacekeepers and further contribute to the protection of the blue helmet. I thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much for those comments. I would also like now to give the floor to two Security Council member state interventions, and then I will go to our co-sponsors after that. Next is the representative of India. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, let me really thank the delegation of Kenya and other co-sponsors for organizing this meeting on a very pertinent topic. I would also thank the briefers for their remarks. Being a leading troop contributor, India accords topmost priority to the safety and security of peacekeepers. They were expanding mandates of peacekeeping missions with limited resources has only added to the challenges and complexities that peacekeepers face on the ground. Ease of access to components for fabricating an IED continues to be a cause of concern for security and law enforcement agencies. We believe that missions facing IED threats should have dedicated resources for countering these threats. The training of UN personnel on IED threats need to be more context specific. Upgrading the security infrastructure of camps of UN peacekeepers, use of helicopters with night flight capability, force commanders with the direct authority for commanding such air assets in the mission, full access to medical facilities in accordance with the golden hour principle, and timely and reliable medical and casualty evacuation are some of the immediate measures that my delegation would like to suggest. Mr. President, in the recent years, India has conducted specialist training on countered IED, bomb disposal and demining with numerous partner countries, including Australia, Cambodia, Indonesia, and Uzbekistan. About 130 personnel from 13 African states participated in the Africa-India field training exercise, a multinational exercise on demining and unexploded ordnance held in India in March 2019. In October 2018, we launched the India for Humanity initiative and conducted 13 artificial limb fitment camps and fitted more than 6,500 artificial limbs in the last 2 years in Malawi, Iraq, Nepal, Egypt, Bangladesh, Ethiopia, Vietnam, and a number of other countries. In view of its success, this initiative has now been extended up to March 2023. India has been cooperating and providing assistance to various countries and stands ready to contribute towards international demining and rehabilitation efforts, capacity building, victim assistance, and victim rehabilitation upon request from member states under the UN mandate. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Nagaraj, for your comments. And let me just recognize what you've just said, and that is India's immense contribution to UN peacekeeping and the losses from your peacekeepers. We recognize and honor them. Next, I have the representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. President. And no doubt ensuring safety and security of peacekeepers is a vital task during the whole life cycle of the mission, of any mission. It's especially important in the challenging security environments where peacekeepers could face asymmetrical threats. IEDs are one of the major types of weapons at the disposal of non-state entities, including terrorists. UN peacekeepers are not mandated to combat terrorist threats, and the primary responsibility for safety and security of the UN personnel rests with the host state. In this regard, it's important to enhance cooperation and dialogue between the UN missions and the host state authorities on these issues. International assistance in strengthening host governments' capacities to address the proliferation of weapons and ammunition, to prevent loss of military equipment, including of possible precursors for IEDs, is in a great demand. There are peacekeeping operations that are specifically prone to such threats. The situation in Mali and in the Sahel region remains extremely difficult. We support the measures adopted by MINUSMA to protect civilian population and its personnel. Somalia is undoubtedly one of the countries where the federal government and AMISOM continue to face an increasing threat of IEDs in its fight with Al-Shabaab. We call upon international community and relevant UN agencies to step up their support to mitigate the IED threat. UNMAS plays an important role in global mine action. For years, Russia has been its consistent supporter. In 2019, we donated $1 million to UNMAS. Our experts have been engaged with the UNMAS colleagues on demining in Syria and elaboration of international standards to counter the IED threat. The Russian armed forces have been actively engaged in demining in a wide range of countries. We reaffirm our readiness to share best practices and experience in humanitarian demining and countering IED threats, including through the International Mine Action Center of the Russian Ministry of Defense. We closely cooperate with the Geneva International Center for Humanitarian Demining. Mr. President, there is a pressing need to strengthen mechanisms of interstate cooperation in the area of preventing and countering crimes committed with the use of IEDs. We wish to highlight the importance of rigorous implementation of Security Council Resolutions 2370 and 2482, including their provisions on combating illegal manufacturing, possession, stockpiling, and trade of explosives and IED components in the context of preventing their use by terrorists. The Russian Federation initiated and sponsored the first ever capacity building project on the nexus between arms, crime, and terrorism under the auspices of UNOCT. The Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons and its amended Protocol 2 on mines also provides an important venue to discuss the issue of IED threat. We would like to call on all states that haven't done so to join the 1994 Convention on the Safety of United Nations and the Associated Personnel, and the 1997 International Convention for the Suppression of Terrorist Bombings. It's also vital to continue the dialogue between the UN member states and monitoring team of UN Security Council committees 1267/1989/2253 and of Committee 1988 in order to have the experts informed of the facts and circumstances of terrorists using IEDs. We should also engage the capacity of Interpol. Mr. President, in conclusion, let me reconfirm that protection of civilians in conflict, as well as the safety and security of blue helmets, remain among top priorities of the Russian delegation. It's of critical importance that the Secretariat works closely with member states including through C-34, in a transparent manner, in improving the security of peacekeepers. UN people on the ground should possess all necessary capabilities, adequate medical support, relevant training, and other tools to implement their mandates, even in very hostile environments. At the same time, it's clear that all these efforts cannot solve the problems posed by terrorist and IED threats alone. The fundamental thing is to help weakened by conflict host countries not only to become capable to fight these threats, but also to be able to extend effective control over their national territories and establish the rule of law. Any peacekeeping operation is first and foremost an essential UN tool in pursuit of sustainable political solution. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Anna, contribution. I would like to note that the members of the Security Council have all had a chance to contribute. And I would now like to welcome the co-sponsors from our other member states, beginning with the representative of Belgium. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's an honor for Belgium to co-sponsor this important meeting and to participate in this discussion on a topic that is of extremely high priority to my country. Let me first thank the briefers and particularly commend UNMAS for its extraordinary work in the development of standards and policies, as well as in the management of demining operations and in explosive ordnance threat mitigation. Mr. President, as the briefers have demonstrated, attacks with improvised explosive devices are a threat to security and development. They can also strongly impact the work of peacekeeping operations. Too many lives have been lost among peacekeepers. The recent wave of IED attacks in Mali targeting MINUSMA is of particular concern. We would like to take this opportunity to honor the memory of the victims and present our condolences to their families. Belgium is convinced that a more integrated and broader approach is necessary to enhance our capacity to tackle the threat of IEDs. In our view, the following 4 elements could improve our response. First, we should ensure the safe management of ammunition stockpiles and the swift disposal of explosive remnants of war, which often provide the base material for IED production. In this regard, we should not lose track of the need to decontaminate legacy minefields. Second, we should gain better insight in the trafficking routes for explosive precursor material. Legitimate trade or mine activities sometimes serve as starting point for this illicit trafficking. Peacekeeping operations and panels of experts can help gather knowledge on the IED supply chains. They should work closely together and consolidate information. Third, on the basis of knowledge gained, we should take measures to prevent the diversion of precursors for the manufacture of IEDs. And fourth, peacekeeping operations and other actors in the field should set up a system for the effective exchange of information on all incidents involving IEDs. This way, a shared knowledge base can be created, which will help to adopt appropriate defensive measures and allow to remain up to speed on the rapidly evolving techniques used in IED attacks. During its mandate as non-permanent member of the Security Council, Belgium undertook to incorporate this approach when renewing the mandates of peacekeeping operations such as MINUSMA and MINUSCA. In April 2019, my country organized, together with Poland and Germany, an Arria Formula meeting entitled Explosive Ordnance Threat Mitigation for the Implementation of a Coherent and Comprehensive Response. At that meeting, our fellow citizen, Major General de Koning, former MINUSMA Force Commander, called for a broad counter-IED strategy encompassing global control on ammunition, weapons, explosive ordnance, and IED components and precursors. The UN Secretariat also formulated concrete proposals to improve pre-deployment training of peacekeepers, to consider mine action at the earliest stage of mission planning, and to enhance the technical capabilities and techniques to address the threat of IEDs. These policies are sound, and their implementation should be regularly evaluated in reports to the Security Council on peacekeeping operations. Finally, Mr. President, more recently, during the negotiations of the C-34 report this month, my country stressed the importance of proper weapons and ammunition management by peacekeeping operations in line with the safety standards of the relevant UN manuals, policies, and standard operating procedures. We also encourage member states and the Secretariat to better equip peacekeeping operations on weapons and ammunition management, to strengthen host government capacities, to address the proliferation of weapons and ammunition, prevent loss and other diversion of military equipment, including of possible precursors for improvised explosive devices, and prevent accidental explosions. These elements were introduced in the C-34 report that has just been adopted by consensus. My country also walks the talk, Mr. President, as Belgian mobile training teams work in support of MINUSMA, providing education and training in, among other things, counter IED and medical skills. Belgium also contributes to the equipment of the Force Conjointe G5 Sahel in CEIED material with €1 million. Furthermore, we support the NATO defense capacity building package for UN peacekeeping training, specifically the Counter Improvised Explosive Devices project. I want to thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Karen. That was not quite 2 minutes. Useful point, but not at 2 minutes. We have exactly an hour to go, and I will enforce the time just a little bit more with your permission. I would like now to welcome the representative of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Kimani, and thank you for Kenya for conveying this this meeting on this important topic. And first, let me excuse Ambassador Brandt, who's unfortunately not able to attend this, and I have the honor to speak on her behalf. Our ability to secure the safety and security of UN peacekeepers is a prerequisite for mission performance and effective mandate implementation. An IED is an indiscriminate weapon, and IEDs do not only pose a threat to peacekeepers, but also to local populations. The proliferation of the threat of IEDs is therefore a serious concern that needs to be addressed with urgency. To counter this threat is a shared responsibility between host states, troop and police contributing countries, member states, and the United Nations Secretariat. The Kingdom of the Netherlands commends the DPO and UNMAS for their continuous efforts to address the threat of IEDs through the development and execution of in-mission training. However, it is important to underline here that in-mission training cannot be a substitute for pre-deployment training and is only complementary to the training peacekeepers receive at home. We, troop and police contributing countries, share the responsibility with the United Nations to prepare our peacekeepers for the hostile environment they will operate in, and must make sure the soldiers we deploy have received the training they need. We recognize counter-IED training requires knowledge and skills that might not be widely available. We therefore very much encourage member states to partner with UNMAS and deploy specialized mobile training teams to assist where needed. Countering the threat of IEDs requires an integrated approach and combined effort of all components in the mission, together with the host state and security partners that are active in the region. It's especially important to understand and degrade the systems that facilitate and sustain the IED threat. We therefore want to commend General Gillenspoor with his attempt to improve on this response and with the development of a common IED strategy, and we also encourage other missions to do the same. Netherlands troops have operated in theaters where IEDs posed the #1 threat. Important lessons that have been drawn from that experience are the need for good intelligence on the threat and the realization that technology can significantly enhance safety and security, but also requires soldiers to understand the functioning and limitations for its proper usage. The Kingdom of the Netherlands will continue to support the efforts of the UN to address the IED threat, and I'm happy to announce we recently decided to continue our contribution of a subject matter expert to the Threat Mitigation Advisory Team of UNMAS with another 2 years. I also like to draw your attention to the preparatory conference the Netherlands will co-host with Pakistan in October, where we will also address this important topic. We encourage the UN, with support of the member states, to further strengthen IED threat mitigation, including through well-coordinated pre-deployment training and capacity development, ensure implementation of IED disposal standards, and to support the UNMAS Threat Mitigation Advisory Team, and to strengthen centralized knowledge and analysis capabilities to better identify emerging threats and enhance UN response and mitigation measures. Finally, as also USG Lacroix did before me, I would like to draw your attention to the high-level virtual event we are co-hosting with the UN this Monday. The event will mark the 3rd anniversary of A4P, and we'll see the Secretary General together with USG Lacroix tell us a little bit more about the plans for A4P+. For your information, we already have over 300 registered participants and hopefully many more joining us through the UN Web TV. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm going to remind you that you're going to hopefully send us all your statements, and we shall capture all your points in their fullness when we compile an overall report. So for now, you can trim them down to the most necessary points that you feel you need to make. Next, I'd like to call on the representative of Italy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will certainly try to abide by your directions. So let me say first off that we fully share the concern for the growing use and impact of improvised explosive devices. Being among the main troop contributing countries, the safety and security of the blue helmets is of utmost concern to us. And as a consequence, we are fully engaged in providing our peacekeepers with adequate training and equipment, knowing that this is indeed paramount to reducing casualties among their ranks and to guaranteeing the high level of effectiveness, efficiency, and performance which we require of them. And it is in this spirit that over the past years, our military training centers have provided specialized training and capacity building to over 10,000 military and police officers from 118 countries and 17 international organizations. And in this context, a special role has been played and is being played by the Center of Excellence for the Stability Police Units, COESPO in Vicenza, which has a consolidated partnership with the DPKO. Besides targeting training, which is certainly a must to effectively counter the threat of IEDs, we need also to promote the establishment or the strengthening of appropriate regulatory frameworks at national and international levels, particularly with regard to the production and transfer of commercially produced precursor materials. We also need to ensure the safe management of military munition stockpiles and the destruction of surplus munitions and ERWs. At the same time, we must raise awareness among retailers about the risks of precursor abuse and step up interagency cooperation, particularly on intelligence gathering. Let me say that domestically, we have established a joint national CIED Center of Excellence in order to harmonize all CIED-related initiatives in order to provide a unique and joint training center within the Italian defense and to contribute to CIED-related concept and doctrine developments at all levels. And finally, to provide technical advice to higher commands and general staff. And in recent years, this center has also developed a wide portfolio of targeted cooperation projects with some partner countries. I would mention only Afghanistan, Colombia, Iraq, Lebanon, Libya, and Vietnam. At the international level, we are also a party to all instruments and conventions that relate to IEDs, which I will omit to mention for the sake of brevity. And from the humanitarian aid perspective, Italy considers mine action as a top priority, and we funded initiatives of the main international entities active in this field. So in a nutshell, Mr. President, we are fully engaged on this very important issue, and we will continue to support the full implementation and universalization of all existing international instruments and to provide assistance to strengthen global capacity in this field. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefano. Next, I'd like to call on the representative of Ecuador.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excellencies, Ecuador is honored to co-sponsor this Arria Formula meeting and thank Kenya as well as other sponsors for their leadership on this matter. I also wish to express my delegation's appreciation to the briefers for their valuable presentations. The efforts to ensure the safety and security of peacekeepers are not only fundamental for their own protection, but also for the protection of civilians and for the success of the UN operations. For that reason, Ecuador co-sponsored the UN Security Council Resolution 2518 adopted on 30th March 2020, which identified the security threats and targeted attacks against peacekeepers, including threats posed by improvised explosive devices. Ecuador reiterates the need to strengthen uniformity of standards on performance throughout enhanced and in-depth training for peacekeepers to counter improvised explosive devices and to mitigate their threats. Modern equipment and technology are also needed for the peacekeepers, but need to be complemented with capacity building of governmental security forces at the national level. We cannot have one without the other. Building partnerships and sharing good practices can help bridging capacity gaps. Furthermore, an appropriate intelligence panorama of peacekeeping context can also provide preventive tools to better detect IEDs. Dear colleagues, safety and security of peacekeepers would not be sufficiently preserved without providing a particular focus on IEDs and without addressing sufficiently the global threat posed by terrorism in full compliance with international law. Mine action should also continue to be mainstreamed into discussions, planning, and mandates. This challenge requires a collective response. Synergies from all principal organs of the United Nations are needed. I therefore commend the report presented by the Secretary General as requested by the General Assembly periodic resolution on countering the threat posed by IEDs supported by Ecuador. Ecuador also addresses the threat during the 7th biennial meeting of states on the implementation of the program of action to prevent, combat, and eradicate the illicit trade of small arms and light weapons in all aspects, whose preparatory process is also being very ably led by you, esteemed colleague, Ambassador Martin Kimani, Permanent Representative of Kenya. To conclude, while we continue as an organization working for more robust response to IEDs, Ecuador underlines that the best way to ensure the protection of peacekeepers as well as of civilians is through additional and permanent efforts to implement the global ceasefire. Ecuador is a country of peace. However, we have also suffered in the past from the use of IEDs by transnational organized crime. We understand their devastating effects, and for that reason, we are committed to support every effort of the Security Council to suppress the deployment of IEDs against peace operations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Permanent Representative Christian, for your contribution. Thank you very much. Next, I would like to invite the Permanent Representative of Portugal. Paulo, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, dear Martin. It's not Paulo. I'm speaking through a platform of my colleague, my political coordinator. But thank you very much for convening this meeting, which we are very proud to co-sponsor. And we also thank today's briefers. UN peacekeeping is very effective, but it can come at a heavy cost. So I would like to pay tribute to all the fallen and injured blue helmets and blue berets. IEDs have become the weapon of choice for many armed groups across different conflicts, turning into one of the most serious threats to peacekeepers. Inexpensive and easy to produce, IEDs allow lightly armed and barely trained militants to engage with better equipped forces at minimum exposure. We need to address this issue. Concurring with many of the concrete suggestions already put forward today, I'll briefly focus on training and information. Knowledge of the country, the conflict, the groups involved, and the respective modus operandi, especially regarding the IEDs more commonly used, are essential to enhance safety and security in a peacekeeping operation. Appropriate equipment, appropriate training before the deployment, information sharing and lessons learned during the induction training are vital to identify and assess the threats and to take appropriate measures. Alongside the ability to identify and inactivate the devices, we also need the capacity to foresee these threats by gathering and sharing information regarding the agents, their intentions, capacities, motivations, techniques, and tactics. Similar training should also be provided to local and national authorities. Concluding, Mr. Chairman, Portugal is a long-standing contributor to peacekeeping operations. The safety and the security of peacekeepers will keep on being a priority to us. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Francisco. I'm just reading at this point.
It was our fault. Thank you, Martin.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Francisco. Next, I have the representative of Germany.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Despite the time constraints, I would like to start by commending you for leading this initiative. Germany very proudly co-sponsors this event and implements quite a number of projects to counter IED threats, such as the project that has been mentioned by the Brigadier in his briefing together with Kenya. Mr. Chair, IEDs pose serious threats to the UN missions and to local populations at the same time. The example of MINUSMA that has been presented by General Gillenspor in his briefing demonstrates that some peace operations have to deal with IED directed against civilians and UN personnel on a daily basis. To counter these threats, we must not focus on military and technical issues alone. We need to overcome organizational silos. We must think and act in a more coordinated and cooperative manner by including the capabilities and expertise of humanitarian, development, stabilization, and peacekeeping actors. I would like to stress some points from an operational perspective. First, we want to mitigate IED threats at mission level. Germany deploys a weapons intelligence team, WIT, to MINUSMA. These experts investigate ammunition, weapons, and IED incidents and provide standardized tactical, technical, and forensic intelligence. These insights feed back into the analysis of IED networks and help understand and counter these networks more effectively. The WIT also supports counter-IED capacity building efforts of UNMAS by training and preparing peacekeepers. In addition, Germany supports research into the sources and trade routes of IED components, e.g. in the Sahel region. Second, we need to strengthen training efforts. For several years, Germany has been providing mobile training teams for train-the-trainer counter-IED pre-deployment training for UN peacekeeping operations. Third, when facing the imminent threats of IEDs, an integrated response is needed and decentralized, embedded explosive ordnances devices teams are crucial to address IED threats on operations. Lastly, we need to improve ammunition safety and security. Ammunition is an important source of components for IEDs. The need to improve ammunition safety and security has been recognized in numerous GA resolutions co-sponsored together by Germany and France. During its 72nd session, the General Assembly established a group of governmental experts, GGE, on problems arising from the accumulation of conventional ammunition stockpiles in surplus. The GGA will resume its work in 2021 under German chairmanship. Mr. Chairman, beyond specific operational aspects, let me reaffirm Germany's strong commitment to addressing the threats of improvised explosive ordnance. Having been among the top 5 donors in recent years, Germany contributed more than $55 million in funding to humanitarian mine action and stabilization in 2020 in 12 countries, including those most affected: Afghanistan, Colombia, Iraq, and Syria. As the host of this year's international meeting of National Mine Action Program Directors and United Nations advisors, and as a current chair of the Mine Action Support Group, Germany's agenda is broad, with a focus on how to prevent harm, protect civilians, as well as ways to support victims of landmines and IEDs. Mr. Chairman, the International Day for Mine Awareness and Assistance in Mine Action next week should serve as a reminder that we all must increase our efforts in striving for a world free of mines and IEDs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Matthias was the last of the co-sponsors who were speaking today. Next, I would like to welcome the permanent representative of Korea to take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for convening this timely meeting. The recent surge of IED attacks against UN peacekeepers is deeply concerning. Because of their unpredictable nature, IEDs constrain our peacekeepers' movement and complicate the mission environment. Against this backdrop, I will briefly highlight the following points. First, we need to address the drivers of the IED attacks rather than merely managing their symptoms. Armed groups and terrorist organizations are using IEDs to leverage their political power. I would like to strongly emphasize the importance of accountability mechanisms. Anybody who carries out IED attacks should be held accountable. Investigations must be concluded swiftly and thoroughly to serve justice. Second, we must take an integrated and coherent approach to enhance the safety and security of UN peacekeepers. As a short-term measure, we need to improve situational awareness and immediate response capabilities. In this regard, I would like to reiterate the critical role of technology in identifying potential threats through surveillance and information gathering, as well as mitigating the effects of an attack through enhanced equipment. Last but not the least, it is crucial to foster strong partnerships with key stakeholders. Our holistic efforts to counter the scourge of IEDs can only be successful when we develop and advance host countries' national capacity as well, considering how civilian casualties far outnumber those of uniformed personnel. When it comes to IEDs, host countries and local communities should be able to address such threats. Moreover, the UN should work closely with troop and police contributing countries to ensure that peacekeepers receive better equipment and training. In conclusion, Mr. President, the Republic of Korea highly commends the leadership of the Secretariat and the contribution of the troop and police contributing countries. I would like to reaffirm our dedication to protecting our peacekeepers. As the host country of the upcoming peacekeeping ministerial in December this year, and a troop and police contributing country, the Republic of Korea is strongly committed to supporting our collective efforts throughout the preparation process and enhancing the safety and security of UN peacekeepers. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Permanent Rep. I want to welcome a man who I'm proud to share names with, Martin, the Permanent Representative of Denmark. You have the floor.
Well, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dr. Kimani. Thank you so much, Martin. All protocol observed. The full version of our statement will be circulated. Let me begin by, on behalf of the Nordic countries, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and my own country, Denmark, to thank the briefers for their briefings. Now, new access and new conflict dynamics have emerged, and the use of improvised explosive devices, IEDs, has increased in many conflict zones around the world. We see them in the shape of a homemade landmine, a booby trap, or a suicide bomb. Now, the Nordic countries strongly support improving the safety and security of peacekeepers as one of the Action for Peacekeeping central priorities. And we commend Lieutenant General Gyllensborg's implementation of this in MINUSMA. Now, we're following up on this commitment in the field. One example is Norway's contribution to strengthen MINUSMA's capacity to investigate IED incidents through its specialized police teams. But the challenges stemming from IEDs are complex and multifaceted, and mitigating this threat requires a broad spectrum of integrated efforts. From adequate pre-deployment and in-mission training of peacekeepers, survey and clearance operations, stockpile management, to development of standards and guidance on risk assessment and threat mitigation, to victim assistance and the prevention of violent extremism. Now, getting rid of this complex challenge will require a long-term commitment from donors and affected countries. And the Nordic countries have a long tradition for contributing to such efforts. We support the efforts of UNMAS to protect UN peacekeepers from explosive threats and direct attacks, and Nordic humanitarian NGOs are at the forefront of global mine action. Persistent and predictable donor commitments are essential. There will be no finishing the job without financing the effort, and the Nordic countries contribute financially to system-wide UN mine action in many countries. In Somalia, Finland directs parts of their funding to safe and secure stockpile management in order to prevent the proliferation of material to terrorist and armed groups. And Sweden supports UNMAS's work on IEDs through the UNSOS Trust Fund. And for more than a decade, Denmark has hosted an annual international explosive ordnance disposal course conducted in cooperation between civil society organizations and the military. Now, curbing the deadly impact of IEDs on UN peace operations will require determination, innovation, and unified efforts. And let me assure you that this will continue to be a Nordic priority. We owe it to those that protect and to those they seek to protect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. I'd like to invite the representative of Costa Rica, who I saw just 2 hours ago at the BMS7 negotiations. Maritza, the floor is yours.
Mr. President, it's good to see you again. Addressing improvised explosive devices is a multidimensional and complex challenge with both security and humanitarian consequences, and one of which the UN and states have a common interest to contribute and seek effective responses. In this regard, please allow me to stress 2 points. First, Costa Rica recognizes that the best means of countering the threat of IEDs lies in prevention through addressing IEDs networks. Defeating the device itself only represents the last line of defense. If we are unable to break the attack cycle before the IEDs are in place, we have already lost much of the fight. Attacking the IED network is paramount, but requires enhanced intelligence collection and analysis capabilities, as well as efficient information sharing. Second, Costa Rica is concerned that a full and comprehensive approach to addressing IEDs has been lacking. We are also troubled by the deficiencies in equipment, medical capabilities, and training shortfalls, which can increase the risk for the safety and security of peacekeepers. We strongly recommend IED awareness training as a mandatory part of pre-deployment training. In keeping with the principle that everyone is a sensor, we suggest that training be obligatory for all mission staff, regardless of rank and position. Further, additional in-country training should be provided within 2 weeks of staff's arrival to assigned post. This serves in providing mission-specific, up-to-date training and supports the standardized practice and force integration. The UN should facilitate partnership and collaboration among T and PCC's parent states who requires CID training specialists and can provide mobile training teams to support pre-deployment and in-country training for those in need. In closing, Costa Rica reiterates the need to provide PKO with on-demand specialized training and mentoring, capacity building and guidance, enhanced security threat assessments and appropriate equipment such as armored vehicles and medical kits, combined with reliable and cost-effective technologies that are constantly renewed and upgraded. I thank you.
Thank you, Maritza. I'd like to offer the floor to the representative of Japan. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thank the permanent mission of the Republic of Kenya and the other co-hosts for convening these important meetings. Today, I'd like to highlight two critical elements to mitigate the threats of IED in peace operations: capacity building and ISR. First, adequate training and capacity building in the areas of counter-IED and EOD should be provided to host state authorities, as well as to troop and police contributors. In this regard, we highly value the role of national peacekeeping centers, including IPSDC, which are serving as regional hubs of training and capacity building for peacekeepers. In addition, the role of the UN Mine Action Services, UNMAS, is critical. We have supported the efforts of UNMAS to provide capacity building support to the relevant authorities in the countries which are hosting UN peace operations, including Somalia, Afghanistan, and South Sudan. For example, in February this year, Japan decided to contribute over $4 million to UNMAS for enhancing the counter-IED and EOD capabilities of the Somali police force. We hope this support will improve the safety and security of UN and AU personnel, the Somali government's security officers, and the people of Somalia. Second, UN peace operations should have adequate capabilities to conduct ISR. In particular, enhancing situational awareness by utilizing innovative technologies and integrated analysis and planning across civilian, military, and police components is essential to better handle the threat of IEDs. Japan stands ready to support the strengthening of ISR capabilities of troop and police contributors, including through our $1.3 million contribution to the UN C4 ISR Academy. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for that very elegant and quick intervention. We have about 12 member states that are coming up and fewer minutes to hear each of them and get back to our briefers and get back to my half an hour closing remarks. So I'll have to ask you, you've emailed your remarks to our secretariat. If you haven't, please do so as soon as you can. And just take your points and make 2 points or 3 points at most, and just jump into it. The more time you can buy us, the more we can get to hear from the general, the brigadier, and the UN Secretariat responding to some of the points that you've made. So that's just an appeal to you. Next, I want to welcome Permanent Representative of Australia. Mitch, you have the floor.
Thanks so much, Martin. The use of IEDs against peacekeeping is shocking. It's a threat to security and safety, but obviously it also hinders the ability of missions to achieve their mandates, and civilians too continue to face the impacts of IEDs. And it's not just death, it's not just disability, it also stops them from getting the health support they need, the education support that they need. From Australia's own operational experience, we're keenly aware of all of these impacts, which is part of the reason why with Afghanistan and France, we co-sponsor the regular General Assembly resolution on countering these threats. But just a couple of quick points. Too often, peacekeeping missions with an IED threat aren't adequately equipped with what they need to mitigate. So we've got to continually employ new technologies and use better intelligence to make sure we can do whatever we can to make people safe. We're proud of our ongoing partnership with UNMAS, and I want to recognise the great work they do. We've been a good financial contributor to UNMAS with other partners, and We supported the development of the UN's first IED disposal standards in 2018, and we've also done some good work on the development and translation of UN guides on gender mine action. And I just want to also mention that since 2019, we've also provided funding to the development of an IED threat mitigation advisory team. And in this regard, we're encouraged by the recent progress in Mali, where the percentage of IEDs detected and cleared has steadily increased. So just in closing, Martin, we reiterate the importance of holding to account the perpetrators of these attacks. And as these asymmetric threats grow, we've got to continue to improve the tools and the capabilities available. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mitch. Next is the representative of Argentina.
Thank you, Chair. My delegation notes with concern that improvised explosive devices continue to pose a major threat to the execution of mandates and to peacekeepers. We acknowledge the effort of the member states and the Secretariat in developing a United Nations strategy to mitigate improvised explosive devices. In this sense, we value the development of the DPKO guidelines on improvised explosive device threat mitigation in mission settings and the United Nations improvised explosive device disposal standards. These documents are an essential guide for the conduct of IED threat mitigation activities and have been developed to fill a gap in the technical guidance required to respond to the expanding and increasingly complex problem of IEDs. However, we consider that these initiatives need to be complemented. In this regard, we encourage the Secretariat to provide a comprehensive risk analysis to the Security Council so that the Council will be able to design realistic mandates that are appropriate for complex environments. In addition, to assist in the development of a strategy to combat improvised explosive devices, we encourage the Secretariat to include troops and police contributing countries. During the 2021 substantive period of sessions of the United Nations Special Committee on Peacekeeping Operations, the negotiating group ABOOM, composed of Brazil, Uruguay, Mexico, and Argentina, proposed in the chapter on safety and security to establish a new methodology to counteract the use of IED. The proposal was reflected in paragraph 164 of the committee's report. This methodology involves the deployment in cooperation with UNMAS of mobile training units whose objective is to develop the capabilities of troop and police contributing states where relevant and upon their request for the detection and elimination of IEDs. We strongly support this recommendation of the Special Committee, and we highlight the need to make it effective by encouraging the participation of UNMAS and of member states with relevant experience in the field of combating IED. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for those comments. Next, I'd like to welcome the representative of Switzerland.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank Kenya and the other co-sponsors for convening this meeting. I will be very brief in my 2 minutes or less to highlight two priorities for Switzerland to reduce the threat posed by IEDs. First, safe and secure management of ammunition is critical. Host governments' ammunition stockpiles are often a source of explosives for IEDs, and Switzerland pursued a political initiative on this issue already in 2015 and provided technical support to countries such as Mali and Bosnia and Herzegovina. Host governments need more support to identify and dispose of surplus ammunition and develop sustainable national capacities. In this regard, the UN International Ammunition Technical Guidelines provide a useful framework. Through ammunition leaks, contingent-owned equipment can equally become IEDs targeted at peacekeepers. Swiss experts contributed to develop and currently support the implementation of the UN Manual on Ammunition Management. Switzerland calls on the Security Council to strengthen ammunition management measures when mandating and implementing peace operations. Second, in the aftermath of recent conflicts, abandoned explosive ordnance has fallen into the hands of armed groups and become a source of IEDs. Explosive ordnance, mines and IEDs found in the theater of operation must be safely and rapidly cleared. Switzerland provided expertise to elaborate the UN military engineer units and counter-explosive threat search and detect manual, and currently supports the development of training material. We also call on the Security Council to consider the rapid control over abandoned stockpiles and clearance of explosive ordnance in peace operation mandates. In line with Resolution 2518 of 2020, Switzerland supports UN standardization efforts as well as robust pre-deployment training. In this regard, we would be interested in hearing from the Force Commander of MINUSMA how these manuals are currently being implemented in Mali. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. I would like to give the floor to the representative of Morocco. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and my sincere apologies for not putting the video. I'm definitely not in a position to put that. So with your approval, I will just move forward. So at the outset, I would like to thank Kenya and all the organizers for this very important and interesting meeting. As we all know,
somebody
can you hear me?
Microphone is on. Please switch off the microphones. Thank you. Morocco, you may continue.
Can you hear me well now? No?
Not very clearly.
With your permission, maybe I could take the floor and about maybe leave one or two delegations. I'll just find I'm on my way to the office.
Okay.
With your permission. Thank you so much.
And next, I'd like to welcome the permanent representative of Slovakia and an old friend, Mikhail. The floor is yours.
Yes, thanks very much, Mr. Chair, dear Martin. First of all, congratulations on this important initiative. And I will deliver less than 50% of my prepared statement, which we will share with you in writing. Special thanks to the briefers. The briefings were excellent. And special greetings to my good friend, the IPSTC director. I personally had a chance to visit IPSTC and work with it for a number of years on a number of initiatives. It's indeed a center of excellence, not only in East Africa. So congratulations to them and best wishes. Indeed, this debate and meeting could serve also as a call for common action to explore ways of reducing the impact of risks and threats of IEDs and to enhance the safety and security of peacekeepers. Protection of our peacekeepers from the use of IEDs as part of force protection is indeed an area where there is a real need to strengthen mutual cooperation and coordination. The threat in the conflict is real, and unfortunately my own country, Slovakia, as a very active and engaged peacekeeper over a number of years, also faced the unfortunate result of IED attacks, in particular in Iraq and Afghanistan. We would also like to highlight the need to focus our attention on prevention of IEDs use and the necessity to adopt measures in so-called left of boom space. The importance of mission preparedness and situational awareness, closer contact with local communities, and legitimate use of intelligence in peacekeeping is also important. Full support for the preparation and training of national capacities in the field of counter IEDs as part of the wider security sector governance and reform issues, which we have been really engaged in a lot over a number of years, together with South Africa as co-chairs of the Group of Friends of SSR. I also would like to stress that the cooperation with other international organizations and regional, sub-regional organizations is critical in this field as well, including the training, and there is a lot of lessons learned and a lot of synergies that we can further promote. Increasing the use of unmanned aerial vehicles by militants is a dangerous trend. These new realities will require the adaptation of peacekeeping operations in response to these new threats. Slovakia has recently contributed to the Voluntary Trust Fund for Assistance in Mine Action. And also we have worked closely with UNMAS and with the IEDs Threat Mitigation Advisory Team, as well as the explosive ordnance threat in Iraq in particular. Of course, this cooperation will further continue. In conclusion, I think we really need a comprehensive approach that incorporates revised policies and systems in order to integrate the technologies into operations. Martin, let me once again congratulate you on this excellent initiative, and we are ready to continue working with you. Thanks.
Thank you very much for those comments. Next, I'd like to welcome the representative of Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a troop and police contributor to UN peacekeeping operations, Indonesia attaches great importance to the safety and security of peacekeepers. Improvised explosive devices have become major sources of threats to peacekeepers and affected demanded implementation of peacekeeping operations. In this connection, I would like to make 3 brief points on how to address these threats. First, the capacity of peacekeeping missions to deter and counter ID threats should be strengthened. The role of UNMAS is critical and needs to be supported with necessary resources and enablers, including equipment and technology. Missions should also be equipped with the necessary intelligence and surveillance capabilities. Second, it is critical that peacekeepers be equipped with necessary knowledge and skills to deal with the IED threats. This can be done both during pre-deployment or in mission training. The Secretariat and UNMAS should assist TPCCs in including by developing training standards and facilitating mobile training on IED threat mitigation. Third, host countries should be supported in building their national capacities to develop a long-term sustainable responses to IED threats. Peacekeeping missions should provide trainings and capacity buildings programs for the host states in this area. Moreover, member states could provide support, including through the provision of technical, financial, and other relevant assistance. I thank you very much, Ambassador.
Thank you. I'm going to ask, there's some, the next speakers are from Indonesia, El Salvador, I think Morocco maybe will still want the floor, Pakistan, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Guatemala, Chile, Sweden, and Bangladesh. I mention them because from Bosnia to Guatemala, Chile, those are all defense attaches. So I'm going to give you a minute each. I know you have done this before. Literally a minute. Do not read your whole statement. I beg you. The rest you can send to us. We shall have it in our report. Just speak in a way that will allow the briefers to engage with you critically. So just 1 minute after the diplomats or the diplomatic staff have spoken, also for a minute. Let's do that. And it's unfair on you because others got a longer time, but that's a price I think we have to pay to just allow the conversation to happen. Next, I want to call the permanent representative of El Salvador. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will do my best. I would like to thank you for convening this meeting. My country has a long history of supporting the United Nations as a troop and police contributing country. And currently, I can proudly express that we have peacekeepers deployed in 6 United Nations peace operations across the globe. Our largest participation is in MINUSMA, that also coincides with it being the peace operation that have suffered the greatest number of peacekeeper deaths, including as a result of deliberative attacks carried out with improvised explosive devices. For this reason, my country fully shares the concern expressed about the serious problem caused by the deployment of improvised explosive devices. In order to mitigate the risk posed by this threat for peace operations, we would like to share the following recommendations. First, to encourage the Security Council to ensure that peace operations are adequately equipped and trained to reduce the threat posed by these improvised explosive devices. Second, we believe that the best way to combat these devices is to maintain a constant vigilance of the logistic road network in order to early detect the explosive devices and eliminate the risk of military convoys, as well as to protect the civilian local population. Finally, and against the backdrop of COVID-19 pandemic, we believe the countering the threats posed by improvised explosive devices requires robust commitment and international cooperation among the states, international and regional organizations, and the private sector as well. In this sense, we call upon the different stakeholders to demonstrate the commitment in addressing the threats that improvised explosive devices pose to peace operation and civilians. At the same time, Mr. Chair, allow me to assure you that you can count on El Salvador's continued engagement on this issue. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Griselda. Let me ask the DPR representative of Pakistan. Amir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador Kimani. My first point, an effective counter IED strategy depends on three critical elements: taking a holistic view of the safety and security of UN peacekeepers, a more strategic assessment of the threat posed by IEDs, and a new preparedness paradigm focusing on enhancing the capabilities of peacekeepers. This should be supplemented by adequate resourcing, provision of necessary tools, including modernizing equipment, capacity building, and adequate medical support for peacekeepers. Equally important is to harness technology to enhance the capabilities of peacekeepers, their mobility and situational awareness to enable them to respond quickly to the threats posed by IEDs. My second point, from Pakistan's experience as a major TCC, our peacekeepers have enhanced capabilities in terms of IED awareness, jamming and disposal, as well as in conducting forensics and investigations. Pakistan has also established a counter IED explosives and munitions school, providing state-of-the-art training, including to participants from other countries. Leveraging this capacity, Pakistan would like to offer counter IED training for troop and police contributing countries at our peacekeeping training centers. In October this year, Pakistan will host a peacekeeping preparatory meeting along with Netherlands on safety and security of peacekeepers, which will also give us the opportunity to discuss the issue of IEDs comprehensively. I will forward full version of my statement through email. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask if the representative of Morocco has cleared up the microphone. Morocco, are you here? Okay, then let's please go forward to the representative of Bosnia and Herzegovina. You have the floor. Bosnia. Okay, let's go forward to the representative of Guatemala. Next is representative of Chile.
Yes, Chair, this is Morocco.
Okay,
Hello?
Morocco, go ahead.
Can I?
Go ahead.
Thank you so much, and my apologies for the logistical issues. So at the outset, I would like to thank you, Permanent Mission of Kenya, and all the organizers and co-organizers of this meeting. Obviously, Morocco is a major TCC. It's like the issue of IEDs very seriously. We also acknowledge that IEDs are very difficult to be mitigated and stopped. They can only be mitigated and managed. They threaten civilian populations, our peacekeepers, but also humanitarian actors. The increase in both the numbers of priority of IEDs incidents, particularly in some UN missions, make it a very important issue for us member states and other stakeholders, in particular the UN Secretariat, to coordinate their efforts to mitigate this threat. The Smart IED Threat Mitigation Technology Roadmap developed by the UN, by UNMAS, is a very good basis for an effective strategy to fight IEDs. From a national perspective, Morocco takes the threat of IEDs very seriously, and Royal Armed Forces have been facing this threat during their operations and different deployments, in particular in CAR and other theaters. Therefore, we focus on the mitigating measures through training, mostly. And for us, we see this issue of mitigating IEDs from three perspectives, mainly, which is training, equipment, obviously using new technologies as well, but also medical evacuation. So we'll be happy to discuss this forward with the Secretariat on ways and means to enhance, in particular, the medical evacuations issues that we do have regarding IEDs. We also take this opportunity to thank the Secretariat for developing proper training material to counter IEDs, which is very important. I think we, as Morocco, think that the UN was sort of not necessarily prepared well, in particular in Mali in the beginning, to tackle IEDs. However, with the time, we managed in a collective effort to develop proper training material in order to deal with IEDs in a proper manner. Our personnel are trained and sensitized on the use of counter IEDs equipment. We also, our personnel, also alerted with appropriate combat gears to protect themselves against IEDs. And we hope that this feature can be actually generalized to all Caucasians deployed in such theater. Finally, the Moroccan Caucasians are equipped with light armored high mobility vehicles, or APCs, as for the SUR, which offer much protection to the personnel and to the equipment. Again, Mr. Chair, my apologies for the logistical issues. I would like to thank again Kenya for organizing this important meeting, and we are at your disposal for any support in this matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask if the representative of Sweden is here. You have the floor.
Thank you for the kind opportunity, but we refer to the Nordic statement by the permanent representative of Denmark. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sweden. Representative of Bangladesh, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, Bangladesh is the largest peacekeeping nation at present in the world, and it's also a big sufferer. To reduce the IED attack, the attention must be focused on the sources of IED components and its supply chain. Bangladesh reiterates to the following points on effective countering the IED threats: the awareness, preparedness, including pre and post-deployment training, collection of intelligence and aerial surveillance, use of armored protected vehicles during move. Bangladesh will continue its unwavering support in fighting the IED threat in every way possible and preparing its peacekeepers during deployment in future operations. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, DA from Bangladesh, because I know these are directly your colleagues who are out there, and we honor the contribution of Bangladesh, and also I forgot to just tell the representative of Pakistan how much we as a UN family appreciate the role of Pakistan in UN peacekeeping. I'm going to give just a different perspective. We've heard from the experts, now we've heard from member states, but there's a few organizations that asked me for the floor. I'll just allow one of them, and that's Ambassador Dr. Mohammed Shahid Amin Khan, to just have 1 minute, just 1 minute, Ambassador, if you're still here, to give us your sense of this topic. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Martin. And first of all, I pay tribute to you and all our colleagues, especially the United Nations Security Council members, permanent and non-permanent. Obviously, the effective tool to respond, the peacekeeping remain one of the most effective strategy at this moment to keep the world more safer. Blue helmet and blue belts, they are doing a lot more to the to save the humanitarian crisis in many countries. Of course, the Kenya, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and many other countries are putting their all efforts into the peacekeeping mission. The permanent members, as America, Russia, and China have spoken out, there are. My suggestion is that the Secretariat and the Mr. Chair should convene a proper forum which should lead to secure and safety measures for the peacekeepers around the world. That is the most essential, that IEDs is a threat for the humanity, and humanity is suffering because of this terror attacks on the blue helmets, not on the blue helmets, on the civilians as well. The Kenya has tremendously, and the other countries, member states of the United Nations, has made efforts to combat this threat to the blue helmets and peacekeepers. But it is not much that seen on grounds. We have to engage the civil society. We have to engage the peoples, those who are having insufficient tools and mechanism to enhance the capability of the United Nations peacekeeping strokes. I thank you very much, Ambassador Martin, and for your efforts and for your mission efforts into the United Nations, and may God bless the peoples, those who are serving to secure and save the humanity in the area of conflicts and crisis. Thank you very much, Ambassador Martin.
Thank you, Ambassador Khan. I'd like to come back to our briefers as we close this event. And I just feel they have so much that has been asked of them, and I'm not sure they can do it justice in the short time that we have. So General Gillenspoor, Brigadier Mwanzige, Ms. Cohn, keep your remarks brief, and we will give you a chance to submit answers to the questions that you feel have been very directly directed at you, and others that you feel you have a pertinent contribution to make, so that when we compile the report, we have a full explanation and engagement from you. So do not feel that you have to say everything in the short time that we have. Let me start with Ms. Cohn, so that we end with General Gillenspoor. Ms. Cohn, who is also being assisted by some of the experts with her, you have the floor.
Thank you very, very much, Chair. And I'd really like to thank everybody in this Arria Formula meeting for the expressions of support and appreciation that I've heard to en masse, you know, as an enabling service that's not very highly visible by intention. Is really wonderful for my team and for the teams in the field missions and field programs to hear this expression of support. So thank you. So what do we need as a matter of priority? We need mandates and resources to keep delivering pre-deployment training, in-mission training, and weapons and ammunition management training to build national capacity in that area. We need trainers to work with our mobile training team. We need bilateral training member states to train to the UN standards and to assist troop contributing countries who may require support to obtain the necessary equipment and maintain the necessary equipment so that they come prepared, as so many speakers have said is essential. We would like member states to contribute to the roadmap for smart IED threat mitigation technology, a resource everybody can benefit from. And let me just say two last things. In your capacity as donors, I can't miss an opportunity to appeal to you to remember that we also work in many countries that are not hosting peacekeeping operations, but where we are addressing landmine and ERW threats that, as you've heard, can remove precursor materials from the hands of armed groups or terrorists that are using them to produce IEDs. And we're also working in non-mission settings to improve the ability of national security services to protect their own civilians, deploy safely to do so. And I would mention Burkina Faso as a place where we're doing exactly that. And I also can't resist asking for your support to build the necessary capacity that we need to do all the things that you've said the UN ought to do at UNHQ. You may know that none of the IED expertise at UNMAS is on the peacekeeping support account. It's all funded through voluntary contributions and contributions from member states, individual experts from member states. So we would really like to be able to approach you and hear this same really warm support for our proposal to build more capacity at UNHQ to be able to respond with policy and doctrine and training and rapid response and all of the advisory services that you've commended us for so far. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much for those comments, and thank you for the leadership that you're showing. Clearly, you could have gone much deeper, and hopefully we'll get a chance to hear even more about UNMAS and what you specifically need in the future and when we circulate a report. Next, I'd like to ask my countryman, Brigadier Mwanzige. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, sir. What I can comment is on training. And as I mentioned, is that training should cover all the three aspects or the three levels and all the three components that we talked about at the strategic, operation, and the tactical level. And the training comprising at the strategic and operational level comprising of the counter IED awareness courses for senior military and civilian leaders. Let's not forget the civilian leaders. At tactical level, all troops need awareness and courses and to understand how to task specialized agencies to defeat the IEDs, and also specialized training such as weapon technical intelligence and IED disposal, that is IED. All these courses are offered at IPSTC. The other one is on qualified and capable instructors. We need to continue training instructors in all the troop contributing countries, such as Uganda, Ethiopia, Burundi. This we have been able to train for a short while, and we want to encourage or to get some funding to continue training these instructors. On information, I would like to say information on IED threats should be provided as part of the counter IED training, which includes IED recognition. And information must also be provided to the civilian population where these peace support operations are taking place. And this serves three purposes. One, it helps the civilians identify suspicious devices and avoid touching them. It protects the population through awareness and an understanding of what they should do if one is suspected. And three, of course, is to win the hearts and minds. Finally, there was a comment on, or rather looked like a question about setting up IEDs for terrorist groups, the networks producing, setting up IEDs for terrorist groups, and terrorist affiliated armed groups be targeted or hampered. And how do we do that? An important part of disrupting the networks is the ability to exploit the IED finds. And this is through training, that is weapon technical intelligence, post-blast investigations. And we always must remember that every IED has a signature. So this signature must be exploited. And that is only through training. So we could do better by enhancing IED exploitation. And we also need to change the mindset. So training really helps. Finally, on intelligence and surveillance capabilities, intelligence, we should have regional sharing, intelligence sharing capabilities such as fusion cells, and also disseminate information timely in regard to IED, and also infiltration into terrorist networks. Otherwise, I'll just urge all the other members to try and support the training at the International Peace Support Training College. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Brigadier, and thank you for your leadership. The work that you're doing is saving lives. And I think the point is well made that ultimately we must build those capabilities if our mandates are to succeed. I want to give the last word to General Gillenspole, who had a very urgent briefing on the specific issues happening with MINUSMA. And all of us know the very important challenge MINUSMA is facing. So General, please answer those questions and just add a few words of your own about, bottom line, what can this community of states and policymakers who are listening do to allow you to succeed at your vital job? You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I want also to come back to the specific question that the Ambassador of France posed on this topic regarding lessons learned for our operations. And to me, it relates to 4 different areas to improve. Situation awareness has been very much discussed, and I won't repeat and go back to it, but in essence, there is a potential for us to do more in the field, but also to gain some additional assets and capabilities. The other area that has been very much discussed today is equipment, to make sure that the troops are sufficiently resourced to counter and to deal with the threat. And I won't go into any effort to repeat all the good points that have been raised already. The third area that I want to come back to, and this relates to the question also by the representative of Switzerland, it's the importance of applying correct tactical procedures. And success is really conditioned by professional behavior. And it starts with robust pre-deployment training. We continue efforts in the mission, and also translating all the way to leadership during operations. And I have to say that the manuals that have been issued, they serve as a common thread for us to make sure that we apply these procedures and that we benefit from the experience. And this also includes the importance of adapting our procedures to the threat as it evolves. The final point is on mobility. In order to deal with threats of this nature, it is important to dominate certain areas to deter these armed groups. And the ability to concentrate our forces, our units, is of essence. And in particular, air support. It relates to armed helicopters, transport helicopters also to provide flexibility, as well as the medical support. And I can reassure you that whenever we have particular armed helicopters in the air in support of convoys and operations in difficult areas, it makes a difference. And the peacekeepers are more secure and safe during those circumstances. And when I talk to our peacekeepers at junior level, their concerns are very much medical support and also some of the equipment that they feel that they haven't been equipped or resourced with. Jammers is a case in point. Addressing these 4 areas would enhance the self-confidence and morale in the troops, and thereby the performance and the safety. So this is indeed something that we will benefit from not just with regards to the IED threat, but in the more general sense. Finally, let me take this also opportunity to express the appreciation from the field and the commitment, the engagement, the support that you have conveyed here is heart feeling. It is very, very important for us, and it is inspiring and something that will make a difference as we continue the conversation and continue trying to improve in the different areas that have been discussed. And I'm quite confident that I also speak on behalf of other missions that face these kind of challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General. Please let the men and women under you know how much we appreciate their sacrifice and their contribution. I was going to close with you, but there's a request for ASG Alexander Zhu to just have 1 minute to represent the USG Lacroix. ASG, you have the floor for a minute. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As somebody who is in charge of UNMAS and other important services in DPO, I would like to make only 3 telegraphic points, though I have to note that I have 8 pages of, very careful notes from all questions, and we have all answers. But as you suggested, we will provide these to your office, and it will be probably reflected. Well, 3 points which I would like to make. First of all, to me, all statements reconfirmed and enriched, our vision and conceptual understanding, of the role of IEDs as a very serious threat, to our peacekeepers and also in non-mission settings. So we will translate them into suggested action with TCCs, PCCs, with donors, with Security Council members, and we will come back to you with the reflections on this. Secondly, there were 2 specific questions from permanent representatives of France and Estonia addressed to Jean-Pierre Lacroix. Well, we will come back to the French and Estonian missions with very specific, we have answers, but I don't want to be remembered as a spoiler of your Friday evening. I mean, so I'm not going in my 8 pages of comments. And last but not least, we will have this year, just to announce, though German and Korean representatives already mentioned, we will have a number of very important high-level events where the specifics of IED challenges and threats and their mitigation can be addressed. And the next one will be literally in a few days from now. It's a national week of directors of mine action centers. So all of your countries, I mean, all member states are invited, and we will discuss there. It will be the whole week. April 4, we have International Mine Action Day, and definitely ministerial on peacekeeping in Republic of Korea this year. We will organize some events which can reflect, and focus in depth on the training, on intelligence, on equipment and technology, and all other issues raised. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership and for your initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ASG. We've come to the end of what I think was a very productive and useful discussion. And I want to thank every one of you for attending and participating so actively and looking to speak to the issues that are being faced by our peacekeepers. I am very grateful to the co-hosts and co-sponsors for their contribution to the success of this event. We're very indebted to the briefers for their insights, for their knowledge, and their first-hand experience, which they shared with us in addressing the challenge that IEDs have against peace operations. I also want to thank the team at the Kenya mission for working so hard from the inception of this idea for this Arria Formula meeting, the follow-up actions, and preparing for today. I thank you for all the hard work that you've done. going forward, the Kenya mission will prepare a document that's reflective of the briefings and your inputs this afternoon, and we will circulate it in due course. I encourage all of you who made statements or who did not make statements to send them to us by email, and the email address is in the chat room if you have not yet done so. As we go, those of us who are in New York go into the weekend, I want us to all remember the peacekeepers who are out in the field, who over the weekend will be pursuing the implementation of the mandates that we've given them. We wish them safety and we wish them success, and we continue to thank them for the effort and sacrifice that they're making on behalf of our UN family. I thank you, and the meeting is adjourned. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Martin. Thank you. Thank you, Brigadier. You was absolutely, absolutely, and India for your contribution for the peacekeepers.
Thank you, sir.